Picture this: a stadium roaring with thousands of fans, a solemn ceremony honoring heroes, a classroom of young students with hands placed over their hearts. What do all these moments have in common? A single song, a melody that echoes through the soul of a nation, sung with a mixture of pride, hope, and reverence. The Star-Spangled Banner. We've all heard it. We've all sung it. Its notes are as familiar as a childhood lullaby. But have you ever stopped to truly listen to the words, to peel back the layers of time and understand the story they tell? These aren't just lyrics. They're a first-hand account, a desperate question penned in the heart of a raging battle. They are the eyewitness testimony of one man who stood on the deck of a ship, watching through the smoke and fire, praying for a sign that his country had not fallen. Who was this man, and what exactly did he see on that terrifying night that inspired a poem destined to become the anthem of the United States of America? His name was Francis Scott Key, and he wasn't a soldier, a general, or a politician. He was a lawyer, a poet at heart on a deeply personal mission that thrust him into one of the most pivotal and dramatic moments in American history. To understand our national anthem, we first have to understand him and the world of chaos he was thrown into. A world at war, where the very future of a young nation hung precariously in the balance. The year is 1812. The United States, barely 30 years old, finds itself locked in a brutal conflict with the most powerful empire on earth, Great Britain. This wasn't a war of distant skirmishes. This was a fight for survival. The British, having just defeated Napoleon in Europe, turned the full might of their military against their former colonies. And they were not holding back. By the summer of 1814, the situation was dire. In a move that shocked the world and sent shivers down the spine of every American, British forces marched on the nation's new capital, Washington, D.C. They faced little resistance. President James Madison and his government were forced to flee in a panic. The British troops then committed an act of unimaginable humiliation. They set fire to the city. The White House, the Capitol building, the Library of Congress all went up in flames. It was a national catastrophe, a symbolic blow meant to break the American spirit completely. Imagine the news spreading across the country. Your capital city is in ashes. The government is on the run. The most powerful navy in the world is sailing up your coast, seemingly unstoppable. It felt like the end. The American experiment, this bold idea of a self-governing republic, seemed destined to be extinguished before it ever truly began. But the British weren't finished. After their triumph in Washington, they set their sights on their next target, a city even more vital to the American war effort: Baltimore, Maryland. Baltimore was a bustling hub of commerce and, more importantly, a notorious nest of American privateers. These were privately owned ships, essentially legal pirates authorized by the U.S. government to attack and plunder British merchant vessels. They were incredibly effective, a real thorn in the side of the British Empire, and London wanted them crushed. Taking Baltimore would not only cripple the American economy, but would also be a devastating psychological victory. If Baltimore fell, many believed the war would be over, and the United States would be forced into a humiliating surrender. Guarding the entrance to Baltimore's harbor was a formidable brick fortress, Fort McHenry. It was the city's last line of defense, as the British fleet, with its dozens of warships armed with heavy cannons and devastating new Congreve rockets, sailed towards the city. Everyone knew the fate of the nation rested on the shoulders of the 1,000 or so soldiers inside that fort. And it's here, in this moment of extreme peril, that our man, Francis Scott Key, enters the story. Key was a well-respected 35-year-old Georgetown lawyer, He wasn't looking for a fight, he was on a mission of mercy. His friend, Dr. William Beans, an elderly and respected physician, had been taken prisoner by the British during their march from Washington. The charge: arresting rowdy British deserters. The British commanders were furious and planned to hang him. Key, armed with letters of commendation from wounded British officers he had helped treat, agreed to sail out to the British fleet under a flag of truce to negotiate his friend's release. He was a skilled negotiator, and, surprisingly, he was successful. The British agreed to let Dr. Beans go. But there was a catch. During the negotiations, Key and his companion had seen too much. They had overheard the British plans for the surprise attack on Baltimore. They knew the fleet's strength, their positions, their strategy. They couldn't be allowed to return to shore and warn the city. So, Francis Scott Key, the lawyer and amateur poet, found himself a reluctant guest of the enemy, detained on a truce ship, forced to watch the impending assault on his country from behind enemy lines. He was transferred to his own small American vessel, but it was anchored in the bay under the watchful guard of the British Royal Navy. From his unique and terrifying vantage point, he had a front row seat to the bombardment. He was close enough to feel the thunder of the cannons, to see the red glare of the rockets lighting up the night sky. As twilight fell on September 13, 1814, the attack began. The British warships unleashed a relentless, deafening barrage on Fort McHenry. Hour after hour, more than 1,500 cannonballs, mortars, and rockets rained down on the American defenders. The sky was filled with smoke, fire, and the terrifying shriek of incoming ordnance. On the shore, the citizens of Baltimore watched and prayed, knowing their lives and their city's fate depended on that fort holding out. For Francis Scott Key, trapped on the water, it was pure agony. He could only watch and wonder. Was the fort still standing? Were his countrymen still alive? In the darkness, periodically illuminated by the flash of explosions, his eyes strained for one thing. One symbol he knew: the fort's commander, Major George Armistead, had ordered to be flown, a massive American flag. This wasn't just any flag. It was enormous, 30 by 42 feet, sewn by a local flag maker named Mary Pick. It was so large that it was meant to be seen from miles away, a defiant gesture to the approaching British. As long as that flag was flying, it meant the fort had not surrendered. It meant America was still fighting. Throughout the long, terrifying night, through the rain and the relentless shelling, Key paced the deck of his ship. Every time a rocket lit the sky or a bomb exploded, he would catch a fleeting glimpse. Was it still there? The broad stripes and bright stars, were they still waving over the ramparts of the fort? The battle raged for 25 agonizing hours. Through the perilous fight, Key watched, his heart in his throat. Then, as the dawn of September 14th began to break, an eerie silence fell over the harbor. The cannons stopped. The smoke began to clear. It was a moment of terrifying uncertainty. Did the silence mean victory or defeat? Had the fort finally fallen? Was the American flag replaced by the British Union Jack? Peering through the mists of the deep and the first light of morning, Key strained his eyes. What he saw in that dawn's early light would move him so profoundly that he reached into his pocket, pulled out a letter, and began to scribble down the words that were flooding his mind and heart. He saw the flag, not just any flag, but that great, enormous flag, tattered and torn from the battle, but still there, still waving. It was a miracle, a symbol of impossible defiance and resilience. In that moment of overwhelming relief and patriotic fervor, the poem that would become the Star-Spangled Banner was born. "Oh say can you z double quotes," was not a statement. It was the breathless, anxious question he had been asking himself all night. And the rest of the verse was the triumphant answer he witnessed at dawn. The fort had held. Baltimore was saved. And in a way, the spirit of the nation was saved with it. Francis Scott Key's poem, initially titled "The Defense of Fort McHenry," was an instant sensation. It was printed on handbills and distributed throughout Baltimore, then set to the tune of a popular British drinking song, "To Anacreon in Heaven." It spread like wildfire, capturing the emotion and pride of a nation that had stared into the abyss and survived. But the story doesn't end there. How did this battlefield poem, set to a pub tune, transform over the next century from a popular patriotic song into the official national anthem of the United States? That journey is a story in itself, a tale of changing American identity, of war, of peace, and of the enduring power of a single moment of inspiration. Join us next time as we explore how a lawyer's poem became the song of a nation. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this story as fascinating as we do, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and ring the bell so you don't miss the next chapter in this incredible story. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Hello everyone, and welcome back to our series on American history. Today, we're diving into a conflict that's often overshadowed by the Revolution and the Civil War, but is absolutely crucial to understanding America's journey as a nation. This is a story of the War of 1812, sometimes called the Second War of Independence. So, grab your notebooks, get comfortable, and let's explore how the United States found itself once again at war with Great Britain. To really get what's happening, we need to rewind the clock a bit. The year is 1803. The American Revolution is a recent memory, about 20 years in the past. The United States is a young, scrappy nation, still figuring out its place on the world stage. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, Europe is in turmoil. Napoleon Bonaparte is on the march, and France and Great Britain are locked in a massive generation-defining conflict, Napoleonic Wars. Now, you might be thinking, what does a war in Europe have to do with America? Well, everything. As a neutral nation, the United States saw a golden opportunity. With Britain and France busy fighting each other, American merchants could trade with both sides. Business was booming. American ships were carrying goods all over the Atlantic, and the economy was growing rapidly. It seemed like a perfect situation, but, as you can imagine, it was too good to last. The first major problem was trade restrictions. Great Britain, with its powerful Royal Navy, was determined to strangle the French economy. To do this, they declared a blockade of Europe. In 1807, they issued the Orders in Council, which basically said that any ship heading to a French-controlled port had to stop at a British port first and pay a hefty tax. If they didn't comply, the Royal Navy had the right to seize the ship and its cargo. Napoleon, not one to be outdone, responded with his own set of rules, the Berlin and Milan Decree. He declared that any ship that stopped at a British port, or even allowed itself to be searched by the British, would be seized by the French. Suddenly, American merchants were caught in an impossible situation. It was like being stuck between a rock and a hard place. No matter where they sailed, they risked losing their ships, their cargo, and their livelihood to one of the European superpowers. For a young nation that depended on maritime trade, this was a disaster. It felt like Britain and France were playing a game of chess, and American ships were the pawns being sacrificed. This economic pressure was infuriating, But there was another issue that was far more personal, far more insulting to American pride. This was the practice of Now, what is impressment? In simple terms, it was forced naval service. The British Royal Navy was massive, and it was constantly in need of sailors to man its hundreds of warships. Conditions on these ships were harsh, pay was low, and desertion was common. To fill their ranks, British warships would stop and search ships on the high seas, looking for deserters. The problem was, they didn't just stop British ships, they started stopping neutral American merchant ships. British officers would board American vessels and line up the crew. They claimed they were only looking for British subjects who had deserted the Royal Navy. But in practice, it was often very difficult to tell the difference between a British sailor and an American one. Many Americans were former British subjects. They spoke with similar accents, and a lot of them didn't have official citizenship. Papers weren't really a thing back then. So, British captains, desperate for manpower, would often just grab anyone who looked or sounded vaguely British. They would claim these men were deserters and force them into service in the Royal Navy. Imagine this. You're an American citizen working on an American ship, and suddenly a foreign warship stops. An officer points at you, and you re-dragged away from your home and forced to fight in a war that isn't even yours. You could be gone for years, and your family might never know what happened to you. Between 1803 and 1812, it's estimated that thousands of American sailors were impressed into the British Navy. This wasn't just an economic problem. It was a violation of American sovereignty and an attack on the liberty of American citizens. Each time a story of impressment reached American shores, it sparked outrage. Newspapers printed fiery editorials, and politicians gave passionate speeches. How could the United States call itself an independent nation if it could uneven protect its own citizens on the high seas? One incident, in particular, brought tensions to a boiling point. This was the Chesapeake-Clapboard affair of 1807. The American naval frigate, the USS Chesapeake, had just left Norfolk, Virginia. It was not prepared for battle. Its decks were cluttered with supplies, and its cannons weren't ready to fire. A short distance off the coast, it was hailed by the British warship, HMS Leopard. The British captain demanded to search the Chesapeake for deserters. The American commander, James Barron, refused. A U.S. Navy ship was sovereign territory. You couldn't just come aboard and search it. In response, the HMS Leopard opened fire on the unprepared Chesapeake. The American ship was blasted at close range, suffering severe damage. 3 American sailors were killed, and 18 were wounded. Unable to fight back, Commander Barron was forced to surrender. The British then boarded the ship and seized 4 sailors they claimed were deserters. This attack on an American naval vessel just off the coast of Virginia was an act of war in the eyes of many Americans. The country was in an uproar. There were calls for immediate retaliation. President Thomas Jefferson, however, opted for a different approach. Instead of war, he tried what he called peaceable coercion. He got Congress to pass the Embargo Act of 1807, which prohibited all American ships from sailing to foreign ports. The logic was that by cutting off all trade, America could hurt the British and French economies so badly that they would be forced to respect American rights. It was a noble idea, but it was a complete and utter failure. The embargo didn't really hurt Britain or France that much. They just found other sources for their goods. But it absolutely devastated the American economy, especially in New England, where shipping was the lifeblood of the region. Ports were empty, sailors were out of work, and businesses went bankrupt. The embargo was so unpopular that it was repealed just before Jefferson left office in 1809. But the core issues, the trade restrictions and the impressment of sailors, remained unresolved. The new president, James Madison, tried other economic measures, but they also failed to change British policy. By 1812, patience was running out. A new generation of politicians, known as the War Hawks, had been elected to Congress, led by figures like Henry Clay of Kentucky and John C. Calhoun of South Carolina. These young, nationalistic leaders were tired of what they saw as European disrespect. They argued that diplomacy and economic pressure had failed. The only way to defend American honor, protect American sailors, and secure American commercial rights was through war. For them, this was about more than just trade. It was about proving that the American experiment in self-government was real, and that the United States was a truly independent nation that would not be pushed around by its old colonial master. They saw it as a chance to finish what the revolution had started, and so, after years of mounting frustration and failed diplomacy, the stage was set. The grievances were clear. The blockades that crippled American trade, the humiliating practice of impressment, and a deep-seated desire to defend American independence once and for all. In June of 1812, President James Madison sent a message to Congress outlining the case for war against Great Britain. After a heated debate, Congress voted to declare war. The young republic was once again taking on the mightiest empire on earth. The War of 1812 had begun. Thank you so much for joining me for this chapter. I hope this gives you a clearer picture of the complex reasons that led America into this second war of independence. In our next video, we'll look at the opening battles and see how this unprepared nation fared against the global superpower. If you found this interesting, please hit that like button. And be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you do unmiss the next part of our story. See you next time. Hello everyone, and welcome back to our deep dive into American history. Today, we're tackling a conflict that's often overshadowed by the Revolution, but is just as crucial to understanding the United States, the War of 1812. Many historians call it the Second War of Independence, and by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why. So, let's set the stage. It's the early 1800s. The American Revolution is a recent memory. But the United States is still a young, fragile nation, trying to find its place in the world. On the other side of the Atlantic, Great Britain is locked in a massive struggle with Napoleon's France. This global conflict spills over and directly impacts the US in a few major ways. First, and perhaps most infuriating for Americans, was the British practice of impressment. Imagine you're an American sailor on a merchant ship, minding your own business. Suddenly, a British warship stops you, boards your vessel, and accuses you and your crewmates of being deserters from the Royal Navy. Whether it's true or not doesn't matter. You're forcibly taken and pressed into service on a British ship thousands of miles from home. Between 1803 and 1812, it's estimated that thousands of American citizens were subjected to this. It was a direct assault on American sovereignty and personal liberty. The very freedom they had fought for just a few decades earlier was being trampled on the high seas. Second, there were major trade disputes. Britain and France both imposed blockades to cripple each other's economies, and American ships were caught in the middle. The US, as a neutral country, believed it had the right to trade freely with anyone. But British naval patrols seized American ships and their cargo, heading for French ports. This wasn't just an insult. It was strangling the American economy, which relied heavily on maritime trade. For a young nation trying to build its wealth, these economic pressures were unbearable. And third, There was the issue of the western frontier. As American settlers pushed westward into territories like Ohio and Indiana, they increasingly clashed with Native American tribes. Many of these tribes, led by charismatic leaders like Tecumseh, were resisting the loss of their lands. They found a powerful ally in the British, who provided them with weapons and encouragement from their forts in Canada. From the American perspective, the British were deliberately stirring up trouble on their frontier, blocking their manifest destiny before the term even existed, and creating a constant state of fear and conflict for settlers. So, you have these three major grievances: the kidnapping of sailors, the seizure of ships, and the incitement of conflict on the frontier. The calls for war in America, especially from a group of young congressmen known as the War Hawks, grew louder and louder. They argued that national honor was at stake. If America didn't stand up to Britain, could it truly call itself an independent nation? The pressure mounted on President James Madison, and in June of 1812, he asked Congress to declare war. The vote was one of the closest war votes in American history, which shows just how divided the country was, but it passed. The United States had officially declared war on the most powerful empire in the world. Now, declaring war is one thing, fighting it is another entirely. America was, to put it mildly, completely unprepared. The U.S. Army was tiny, poorly trained, and badly equipped. Its navy consisted of just a handful of warships, which seemed almost laughable compared to Britain's Royal Navy, the undisputed master of the seas, with hundreds of ships at its command. The initial American strategy was based on a huge miscalculation. They believed they could quickly and easily invade and conquer Canada. The thinking was that Canadian colonists would welcome the Americans as liberators from British rule. They could not have been more wrong. The American invasion of Canada in 1812 was a complete and utter disaster. It was planned as a three-pronged attack aimed at Montreal, the Niagara region, and the area around Detroit. All three failed spectacularly. General William Hull, leading the western prong, actually surrendered Fort Detroit without firing a shot, terrified by a clever British bluff involving Tecumseh's warriors. The other invasion forces were stalled by a combination of British regulars, Canadian militia who fought fiercely to defend their homes, and their Native American allies. Instead of a swift victory, the U.S. found itself on the defensive, with its own territory now under threat. These early defeats were a brutal wake-up call. The dream of a quick war was shattered, replaced by the grim reality of a desperate struggle against a global superpower. But even in these dark early days, there were glimmers of hope, particularly at sea. While the U.S. Navy was small, its ships, like the USS Constitution, were fast, powerful, and crewed by skilled, motivated sailors. In a series of stunning one-on-one ship duels, American frigates repeatedly defeated their British counterparts. The USS Constitution earned its famous nickname, Old Ironsides, when British cannonballs were seen bouncing off its tough oak hull. These naval victories, while not strategically decisive in the grand scheme of things, were a massive morale boost for the American public. They proved that Americans could stand up to the mighty Royal Navy and win. It was a powerful symbol that the spirit of '76 was still alive. However, the tide of the war took a dramatic turn in 1814. Napoleon was defeated in Europe, which freed up Britain to send its veteran troops and its full naval might across the Atlantic. The war was about to enter its most dangerous phase for the United States. The British planned a major offensive, including a coastal blockade that would strangle American trade, and a series of raids along the Atlantic coast. The most humiliating moment of the war came in August 1814. A British force, landed in Maryland and marched on the nation's capital. Washington, D.C., the American militia, tasked with defending the city, was quickly routed at the Battle of Bedtime. The British marched into Washington, unopposed, and in retaliation for the American burning of a Canadian city earlier in the war, they set fire to the public buildings. The White House, the Capitol building, and the Library of Congress all went up in flames. President Madison and his government were forced to flee into the Virginia countryside. It was the absolute low point of the war. An enemy force had captured the Capitol and burned its most important symbols of government. The very existence of the Republic seemed to be hanging by a thread. But from this moment of national humiliation came a moment of incredible resilience. After burning Washington, the British next set their sights on the much more strategically and economically important city of Baltimore. But Baltimore was ready. The city's defenses were anchored by Fort McHenry, which guarded the entrance to the harbor. For 25 straight hours, British warships bombarded the fort with a relentless barrage of rockets and cannonballs. A young American lawyer named Francis Scott Key was detained on a British ship during the bombardment. All through the night, he watched the rockets' red glare and the bombs bursting in air, anxiously looking for a sign that the fort had not surrendered. When dawn broke, he saw the massive American flag, which had been specially made to be visible from a distance, still flying proudly over the fort. The British attack had failed. Baltimore was saved. So moved by this sight, Key penned the words to a poem that would later become America's national anthem, the Star-Spangled Banner. The defense of Fort McHenry, coupled with another key American victory at the Battle of Plattsburgh in New York, stalled the British invasion from the north. Both sides were exhausted. The war had become a costly stalemate. Back in Europe, diplomats had been working for months to find a way to end the conflict. On Christmas Eve of 1814, they signed the Treaty of Ghent. The treaty essentially returned everything to the way it was before the war. No territory changed hands. The treaty didn't even mention impressment or trade rights, the very issues that had started the war. On paper, it looked like the war had been fought for nothing. But here's the twist. News traveled slowly back then. 2 weeks after the peace treaty was signed. But before the news reached America, the final and greatest battle of the war took place. The Battle of New Orleans. A massive, battle-hardened British force attempted to seize the vital port city. They were met by a ragtag American army under the command of a tough, charismatic general named Andrew Jackson. Jackson's force was a diverse mix of Army regulars, frontier militia from Tennessee and Kentucky, local citizens, and even a group of pirates. From behind hastily constructed ramparts, they delivered a devastating defeat to the British, inflicting over 2,000 casualties, while suffering very few themselves. The Battle of New Orleans was a spectacular, almost unbelievable American victory. And because the news of the victory reached the American public before the news of the peace treaty, it created the overwhelming impression that America had won the war outright. Andrew Jackson became a national hero overnight, and a massive wave of patriotism and national pride swept across the country. Because while the Treaty of Ghent didn't grant any new territory or rights on paper, the war fundamentally changed how America saw itself and how the world saw America. Never again would Britain or any other European power treat the United States as a junior partner or question its sovereignty. Second, the war shattered the power of the Native American confederacies in the Northwest, opening the floodgates for westward expansion. Third, the conflict forced the U.S. to develop its own domestic manufacturing, as the British blockade cut off access to European goods. The shared experience of near defeat, resilience at Baltimore, and the stunning victory at New Orleans forged a powerful feeling of unity and national spirit. The War of 1812 confirmed the results of the Revolution. It was a messy, difficult, and often mismanaged conflict. Imagine this. It's a sweltering August in 1814. The young United States is locked in a fierce struggle with the most powerful empire on earth, Great Britain. For 2 years, the War of 1812 has raged, a brutal back-and-forth contest. Americans have scored stunning victories at sea and have even burned the Canadian capital of York. But now, the British are seeking revenge, and their target is the heart of the American Republic itself, Washington, D.C. Just days before, at the Battle of Bladensburg, American militia, many of them inexperienced and poorly equipped, were swept aside by disciplined British Red. The battle was a disaster, a rout so swift it was mockingly called the Bladensburg Races, because of how quickly the defenders fled. The road to Washington was now wide open. Panic gripped the city. Government clerks frantically packed priceless documents, including the original Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, into linen sacks and smuggled them out of the city just in the nick of time. In the President's house, later known as the White House, First Lady Dolly Madison was a pillar of calm amidst the chaos. As the sound of distant cannons grew louder, she refused to abandon her post until a precious full-length portrait of George Washington was saved from capture. She knew it wasn't just a painting. It was a symbol of the nation's founding spirit. With moments to spare, the canvas was cut from its frame and carried to safety. Dolly Madison then fled, joining the stream of refugees escaping the doomed city. She was one of the last to leave. On the evening of August 24th, under a sky illuminated by the eerie glow of twilight, British troops marched unopposed into the nation's capital. The city was practically deserted, its residents having fled in terror. The British commander, General Robert Ross, and Admiral George Cockburn rode at the head of their columns. Their objective was not just to occupy, but to humiliate. They marched down Pennsylvania Avenue, the silence of the empty streets broken only by the rhythmic tramp of their boots and the jingle of their equipment. Their first target was the magnificent, though still unfinished, Capitol building. This was the seat of American democracy, the place where the laws of the land were made. The soldiers swarmed inside, piling furniture, books, and curtains into great heaps in the Hall of Representatives. Admiral Cockburn, in a theatrical display of contempt, climbed into the speaker's chair and mockingly asked his troops, "Shall this harbor of Yankee democracy be burned? All for it will say aye." A thunderous roar of approval was his answer. Torches were then put to the pyre. Flames erupted, greedily consuming the symbol of American self. The intense heat cracked the stone walls and melted the glass of the skylights, sending a shower of molten glass down onto the floor. From the Capitol, the British marched toward the President's house. They found it abandoned, but strangely, the dining room was set for a grand dinner for 40 guests. President Madison and his cabinet had planned to celebrate a victory that never came. The British officers, with a sense of grim irony, sat down and feasted on the captured meal, drinking the president's wine and toasting to the king. After their impromptu banquet, they too set the torch to the building. Flames shot through the windows, engulfing the elegant structure. The sandstone walls were blackened and charred, but they would miraculously stand. Throughout the night, the British continued their destructive work. The Treasury Department, the War Department, and other public buildings were put to the flame. The sky over Washington turned a hellish orange, visible 4 miles around. For the citizens hiding in the nearby countryside, it was a horrifying spectacle. They watched as the very symbols of their young nation as sovereignty and ambition were reduced to smoking ruins. It was a profound shock, a moment of deep national shame and despair. Could the Republic even survive this? It felt as though the American experiment itself was going up in flames along with its capital. But then, something extraordinary happened. As if nature itself was responding to the carnage, the weather turned. On August 25th, the day after the fires began, the sky darkened and a massive thunderstorm, some even described it as a hurricane or a tornado, descended upon the city. Torrential rains doused many of the flames, saving what was left of the structures. The powerful winds tore roofs from buildings and were so violent that they reportedly British cannons off their carriages. The storm did more damage to the occupying army than the American militia had. Shaken by the freak storm and aware that American forces were regrouping, the British decided their work was done. Their point had been brutally made. After only about 26 hours in the city, they withdrew, leaving a smoldering, devastated capital in their wake. When President Madison returned, he found a scene of utter desolation. The president's house was a blackened, hollowed-out shell. The capital was a ruin. The city was a ghost of its former self. Yet, from these ashes, something powerful began to grow. The burning of Washington, intended to break the American spirit, did the exact opposite. Instead of collapsing in despair, Americans were filled with a renewed sense of outrage and determination. The act was seen not as a legitimate act of war, but as a barbaric act of vandalism. Newspapers across the country decried the destruction, and a new wave of patriotism surged through the populace. Men who had been reluctant to enlist now flocked to join the army. The Bladensburg races were forgotten, replaced by a burning desire for retribution. This new resolve would be tested just a few weeks later. The British fleet sailed north to their next target, the bustling port city of Baltimore. But Baltimore would not be another Washington. The city was prepared, its defenses fortified. The failed British assault on Fort McHenry, which guarded the city's harbor, would become one of the most iconic moments in American history. The sight of the American flag still flying over the fort after a night of relentless bombardment inspired a young lawyer named Francis Scott Key to pen a poem. That poem, The Defense of Fort McHenry, would later be set to music and become the national anthem. The Star-Spangled Banner. The burning of Washington was one of the lowest points in American history. It was a moment of profound vulnerability, where the nation's very existence seemed to hang by a thread. But it was also a crucial turning point. It forged a stronger sense of national identity and unity out of the fires of destruction. The charred walls of the White House and the Capitol were eventually rebuilt, bigger and more resilient than before, becoming powerful symbols of American perseverance. They stand today not just as monuments to a government, but as a testament to a nation that was tested by fire and emerged stronger. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey back in time. If you found this story as fascinating as I do, please hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the pivotal moments that shaped our world. We'll see you in the next chapter of history. Hello and welcome back to our series. In our last chapter, we witnessed the harrowing fall of Washington, a moment of profound shock for the young American nation. The British, emboldened by their victory, now set their sights on a new prize. A bustling hub of commerce and a notorious haven for privateers, the city of Baltimore, Maryland. For the British, capturing Baltimore wasn't just a military objective, it was personal. They saw it as a nest of pirates, a city that had profited immensely from the war by preying on their merchant ships. Taking it would be both a strategic and symbolic blow. As news of the British fleet sailing up the Chesapeake Bay spread, a palpable sense of dread mixed with defiant determination gripped the citizens of Baltimore. They had seen what happened to their nation's capital, the smoldering ruins of the White House and the Capitol building. They knew their turn was next, and they were resolved not to suffer the same fate. Unlike the disorganized and delayed response at Washington, Baltimore's leadership and its people sprang into action with remarkable speed and unity. This was not just a fight for soldiers. It was a fight for every man, woman, and child. The city's defense was spearheaded by a formidable figure, Major General Samuel Smith. A veteran of the Revolutionary War and a U.S. Senator, Smith was a man of immense experience and unwavering resolve. He understood that Baltimore's survival depended on a multi-layered defense. The British would likely attempt a two-pronged attack, a land assault to encircle the city, and a naval bombardment to force its surrender from the water. To counter this, Smith devised a brilliant and comprehensive defensive strategy. The first line of defense was to be on land east of the city. Smith knew the British would land their troops at North Point, a peninsula about 14 miles from the city center, and march overland. He mobilized the Maryland militia, a force of roughly 15,000 men. These weren't all seasoned soldiers. They were merchants, blacksmiths, farmers, and clerks, men from all walks of life who took up arms to defend their homes. Under the command of Brigadier General John Stricker, a portion of this militia was sent to meet the British head, not to defeat them in a pitched battle, but to delay their advance, to bleed them, and to buy precious time for the main defenses to be solidified. Back in the city, an incredible scene of communal effort unfolded. General Smith called upon the entire populace to contribute. A committee of vigilance and safety, reminiscent of the Revolutionary era, was formed to organize the city's defenses. They issued a public call for volunteers to dig earthworks and fortifications on Hampstead Hill, a strategic high ground overlooking the eastern approaches to the city. The response was overwhelming. Free and enslaved African Americans, white laborers, shopkeepers, and wealthy merchants worked side by side, shoulder to shoulder, digging trenches and building redoubts under the hot September sun. It was a powerful display of unity in the face of a common enemy. These extensive earthworks, armed with dozens of cannons, would present a formidable obstacle to any attacking army. While the land defenses were taking shape, all eyes turned to the harbor. The key to Baltimore's maritime defense was a star-shaped bastion standing guard at the mouth of the Patapsco River, Fort McHenry. If the fort fell, the British Navy would have a clear path to bombard the city into submission. Its commander, Major George Armistead, was acutely aware of the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. He had a garrison of about 1,000 men, a mix of regular army soldiers, sailors, and volunteer artillerymen. In the months leading up to the attack, Armistead had worked tirelessly to prepare the fort. Cannons were cleaned, ammunition was stockpiled, and the fort's walls were reinforced. But Armistead wanted something more. He wanted a symbol of defiance, something that would be visible to the enemy fleet and inspire the defenders of the city. He commissioned a local flag maker, Mary Pickersgill, to create a garrison flag of enormous proportions. The flag she and her team stitched together was massive, 30 feet by 42 feet. Each star was 2 feet across, each stripe 2 feet wide. This was not just a flag. It was a statement. It was a declaration that Fort McHenry, and by extension Baltimore, would not surrender. This colossal banner, known as the Great Garrison Flag, was raised over the fort, a vibrant symbol of American resolve. To further protect the harbor, the city's defenders devised a clever plan. They deliberately sank a line of their own merchant ships in the narrow channel leading to the inner harbor, just beyond Fort McHenry. This created an impassable underwater barrier, a man-made reef that would prevent the deep-drafted British warships from getting close enough to bombard the city directly. The British fleet would be forced to anchor out of range of the city's guns and focus their entire naval fury on the lone sentinel standing in their way, as the British fleet, a terrifying armada of some 50 ships, including powerful bomb ketches and the rocket vessel HMS Air, appeared at the mouth of the Patapsco on September 12, 1814. The stage was set. On land, General Stryker's militia marched out to meet the advancing British red. In the harbor, Major Armistead and his men braced themselves within the walls of Fort McHenry, their gaze fixed on the approaching enemy and the giant flag fluttering above them. The people of Baltimore, having done all they could to prepare, watched from their homes and from Hampstead Hill, their hearts filled with a mixture of fear and hope. The fate of their city, and perhaps the morale of the entire nation, hung in the balance. The preparations were complete. The enemy was at the gates. The battle for Baltimore was about to begin, an engagement that would test the limits of American endurance and give birth to a timeless anthem of freedom. Thank you so much for joining us for this chapter. The story of what happens next at North Point and Fort McHenry is one of courage, firepower, and unforgettable drama. Be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next part of our series. We'll see you then. Hello everyone, and welcome back to our journey through American history. In our last chapter, we set the stage with the dramatic backdrop of the War of 1812. Now, it's time to meet the man who would find himself at the heart of one of its most defining moments. So, grab a seat as we open Chapter 6 and introduce the one and only Francis Scott Key. Who exactly was this man, whose name is now synonymous with the American national anthem? Before he was a household name, Francis Scott Key was, first and foremost, a highly respected lawyer. Born in 1779 on his family's plantation, Terra Rubra, in what is now Carroll County, Maryland, Key was a product of the upper echelon of Maryland society. He was well educated, articulate, and known for his sharp, legal mind. By the 1810s, he had established a thriving legal practice in Georgetown, a bustling port city right next to the new capital, Washington, D.C. He was the kind of man you'd want in your corner. Known for his integrity, his persuasive arguments, and his deep commitment to justice. He even argued several cases before the U.S. Supreme Court, which speaks volumes about his professional standing. But Key was far more than just a successful attorney. He was a man of deep and abiding faith, a devout Episcopalian. His religious beliefs were not just a Sunday affair. They were the very bedrock of his character and worldview. He was active in his church, involved in various religious societies, and his faith informed his every action, from his legal work to his personal relationships. This spiritual depth gave him a strong moral compass and a sense of purpose that would guide him through the incredible events that were about to unfold. He even seriously considered giving up law to join the ministry at one point, which shows you how central his faith was to his identity. Beyond the courtroom and the church, Key had another, more private passion: poetry. He wasn't a professional poet by any means, but an amateur wordsmith who enjoyed crafting verses in his spare time. He would write poems for friends, for special occasions, or simply to express his thoughts and feelings on the world around him. His poetry was often reflective, touching on themes of nature, faith, and, importantly, his love for his country. It was a hobby, a creative outlet, but this talent for turning powerful emotions into rhyming stanzas would soon prove to be his most enduring legacy. No one, Least of all Key himself could have predicted that one of his poems would become the most famous song in American history. Now, let's talk about his patriotism, because it's a little more complex than you might think. Key was a proud American, no doubt about it. He loved his country and believed in its founding principles. However, his feelings about the War of 1812 were complicated. Like many Americans, especially those in the Federalist-lining circles of Maryland, Key was actually opposed to the war. He believed it was a mistake, an unnecessary conflict that would bring nothing but suffering and economic hardship. He saw it as a lump of wickedness and a political blunder by President Madison's administration. He wasn't a war hawk. He was a man who prayed for peace. This is a crucial point to understand. The man who would write the ultimate American war anthem was, in fact, against the war itself. His patriotism wasn't the blind, flag-waving sort. It was a thoughtful, and at times critical, love for his country. He could disagree with his government's policies while still holding a deep-seated devotion to the nation itself. This internal conflict makes his story all the more compelling. He wasn't on the battlefield because he wanted to be. He was there because circumstances, duty, and a desperate mission for a friend would place him there. So, let us paint a picture of Francis Scott Key in the summer of 1814. He is a 35-year-old family man, a successful lawyer with a comfortable life in Georgetown. He's a man of God, a man of letters, and a man who is deeply troubled by the war raging around him. Washington, D.C., his own backyard, has just been burned by the invading British forces. The future of the young republic feels uncertain, hanging precariously in the balance. Key is watching his world be turned upside down, feeling a mix of frustration with his government and a growing sense of dread about the British threat. He is an observer, a civilian, a man of peace caught in a time of war. He has no military aspirations. He has no desire for fame or glory. His primary concerns are his family, his clients, and his community. He is, in many ways, an ordinary man, albeit a very accomplished one. And that's what makes his journey so extraordinary. History wasn't something he sought out. It was something that found him. It was a series of unforeseen events, a chain of friendship and obligation that would pull him from the safety of his Georgetown home and place him on a small boat in the middle of the Patapsco River, with a front row seat to one of the most ferocious bombardments of the war. His path to history was entirely unexpected. It wasn't born of a grand plan, but of a simple act of loyalty. A respected town elder, Dr. William Beans, had been taken prisoner by the British. Key, being a renowned lawyer and a friend of Dr. Beans, was asked to undertake a dangerous mission, to sail out to the British fleet and negotiate the doctor's release. He agreed, not as a soldier or a spy, but as a concerned citizen and a skilled negotiator. He was simply trying to help a friend. Little did he know that this mission of mercy would lead him directly into the pages of history books, forcing him to witness a battle that would inspire him to write words that would echo for centuries. So, this is Francis Scott Key. Not a soldier, but a lawyer. Not a warmonger, but a man of faith. Not a professional songwriter, but an amateur poet. A patriot who was conflicted about the very war that would define his legacy. He is the unlikely hero of our story, a man whose personal skills and private passions were about to collide with a pivotal moment in his nation's history. In our next chapter, we will follow Key as he embarks on this perilous mission. We'll board the ship with him, sail into the heart of the British fleet, and discover how this peace-loving lawyer ended up with an unparalleled view of the relentless attack on Fort McHenry. The stage is set. and our protagonist is on his way. Thank you so much for joining me for this chapter. It's a fascinating story, and we've only just scratched the surface. If you're enjoying this journey, please hit that like button, and be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss what happens next. We'll see you in the next video. Imagine this. The smoke of battle has barely cleared from the smoldering ruins of Washington, D.C., and a young lawyer named Francis Scott Key is about to embark on the most important mission of his life. Not on a battlefield, but in the heart of the enemy's Dena British warship. This is Chapter 7. The Prisoner Exchange Mission. The year is 1814. The War of 1812 is raging, and American spirits are low. The British have just torched the U.S. Capitol and the White House. Amidst this chaos, a respected physician from Maryland, Dr. William Beans, finds himself in a dire situation. He's been taken prisoner by the British, accused of treachery after arresting some straggling British soldiers. His friends are desperate, and they turn to the one man they believe can navigate the treacherous waters of wartime diplomacy, Francis Scott Key. A man known for his eloquence and integrity is joined by Colonel John Skinner, the American agent for prisoner exchange. Their mission? To sail out to the British fleet anchored in the Chesapeake Bay and persuade the British High Command to release Dr. Beans. It's a daunting task. They're venturing into hostile territory, armed not with cannons, but with letters and the power of persuasion. As their small American sloop cuts through the choppy waters of the Patapsco River, the sheer scale of the British Royal Navy comes into view. A forest of masts dominates the horizon. Dozens of warships, including the flagship HMS Tonnant and 80-gun Behemoth. It's an intimidating sight. A floating city of military might. Kianskina. They are rowing into the lion's mouth. They are brought aboard the HMS Tonnant and escorted to the quarters of the formidable commanders, Vice Admiral Alexander Cochrane and Rear Admiral George Cockburn. The air in the Admiral's cabin is thick with tension. Admiral Cockburn, in particular, is incensed. He views Dr. Beans not as a prisoner of war, but as a traitor who violated the gentlemanly codes of conduct. He's determined to see the doctor hang. The initial negotiations are brutal. The British commanders are dismissive, their voices sharp with the arrogance of victory. They see no reason to release a man they believe has wronged them. Key, however, remains composed. He's a lawyer, and this is his courtroom. He doesn't raise his voice or issue threats. Instead, he presents his case with logic and quiet dignity. This is where the tide begins to turn. Key and Skinner have brought with them a pouch of letters. These aren't official government documents. They are letters written by wounded British soldiers left behind after the Battle of Blitz. In these letters, the soldiers describe the kindness and excellent care they received from American doctors, including none other than Dr. William Beans himself. Key reads these accounts aloud. He paints a picture not of an enemy, but of a compassionate physician who upheld his oath to heal, regardless of the uniform his patient wore. He argues that executing a man of such character would be a stain on the honor of the British military, an act of cruelty rather than justice. The British admirals listen, their stern expressions slowly softening. The letters have a profound effect. They speak to a shared code of honor among soldiers and gentlemen. Admiral Cochrane, a man of a more temperate disposition than Cockburn, is particularly moved. The evidence is undeniable. Dr. Beans is not the villain they imagined. He is a man of principle. After much deliberation, the admirals finally agree. Dr. Beans will be released. A wave of relief washes over Key. He has succeeded, but his relief is short-lived. There's a catch, a big one. While Key and Skinner were negotiating, They overheard conversations. They saw maps laid out. They learned of the British military's next target. The city of Baltimore. The element of surprise is crucial for the British plan to bombard Fort McHenry, the key to conquering the city. Because Key and his companions now know too much, the British cannot allow them to return to shore. They can't risk them warning the American forces. So, while they agree to release Dr. Beans, all three Americans, Skinner, and the newly freed Dr. are to be held under guard on their own small sloop, tethered to the British fleet. They are no longer negotiators. They are detainees. They are forced to become spectators to the impending British assault on their homeland. As their small boat bobs in the water, under the watchful eye of a British warship, Key looks towards the distant shore, towards Fort McHenry. He sees the massive American flag, the garrison flag, waving defiantly over the fort. The British commanders are confident. They boast that the fort will fall in a matter of hours. They predict that by the next morning, the British Union Jack will be flying over Baltimore. For Francis Scott Key, trapped behind enemy lines, a long and anxious night is about to begin. He is about to witness a bombardment of terrifying intensity, a spectacle of fire and fury that will test the resolve of his nation. Little does he know, this night of terror and uncertainty will inspire him to write words that will echo through centuries, words that will define the very spirit of America. He is a prisoner, yes, but he is also a witness to history in the making. The prisoner exchange mission is over, but the story of the Star-Spangled Banner is just beginning. Thank you so much for watching. This piece of history is truly incredible, isn't it? If you enjoyed this story and want to hear what happens next, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. We have so many more amazing stories to share with you. See you in the next chapter. Hello everyone, and welcome back to our journey through the incredible story behind the Star-Spangled Banner. Last time, we left Francis Scott Key and John Stuart Skinner after they successfully negotiated the release of Dr. William Beans. It was a moment of triumph, a testament to Key's skill as a lawyer and the power of human connection, even in the midst of war. They had the letters from wounded British soldiers, they had secured their friends' freedom, and they were ready to head home. But war, as we know, is rarely that simple. Just as they were preparing to depart, their relief turned to alarm. The British officers, led by Admiral Cochrane and General Ross, delivered some stunning news. Yes, Dr. Beans was free, but no one was going anywhere. Not yet. Not yet. Key, Skinner, and Beans were to be detained. They were now, for all intents and purposes, prisoners of the British fleet. Now, why the sudden change of heart? The British weren't being malicious, at least not in their view. They were being strategic. You see, Key and Skinner had spent days aboard the flagship, the HMS Tonnant. They had been in the very heart of the British command center. They had seen the maps. They had overheard the hushed conversations. They had witnessed the immense scale of the British naval power gathering in the Chesapeake. The British were on the verge of launching a major assault, a decisive blow they hoped would cripple American morale. Their target, the city of Baltimore. And the key to taking Baltimore was its primary defender, Fort McHenry. The British commanders knew that if they released the Americans, Key and Skinner would, with the best of intentions, rush back to their countrymen and warn them. They would reveal everything they had seen: the number of ships, the positions of the fleet, the timing of the attack. They couldn't risk it. The element of surprise was paramount. So, the decision was made. The Americans would have to stay with the fleet until after the battle was over. Imagine the feeling for Key. He had come on a mission of mercy, a diplomatic effort to save a friend. He succeeded, only to find himself trapped, an unwilling spectator to an attack on his own country. He wasn't on an American ship, surrounded by his fellow countrymen. He, along with Skinner and Beans, was transferred from the flagship to his own American truce ship, but it was anchored under the close watch of the British fleet. He was, quite literally, behind enemy lines. From the deck of his small vessel, Key had a front row seat to the might of the Royal Navy. He watched as dozens of warships maneuvered into position, their massive cannons pointing menacingly toward the shore. He saw the countless smaller boats being prepared to land thousands of British soldiers. The scale of it must have been overwhelming, a terrifying display of military power aimed directly at his home. Baltimore was a city he knew and loved, a vital hub of American commerce and patriotism. Fort McHenry was its guardian, a star-shaped bastion, standing defiantly at the mouth of the Patapsco River. Key was now forced to watch as the world's most powerful navy prepared to unleash its full fury upon it. The anxiety must have been unbearable. He was a lawyer, a poet, a man of faith, not a soldier. Yet here he was, caught in the calm before a ferocious storm. He could only watch and wait, his heart pounding with a mixture of fear and hope. Fear for the lives of the soldiers in the fort, for the citizens of Baltimore, for the very future of his young nation, and a sliver of hope, a desperate prayer that somehow, against all odds, the fort would hold, that the American spirit, embodied by that small garrison, would refuse to break. The British officers were confident, almost arrogant. To them, the fall of Fort McHenry was not a question of if but when . They had just burned Washington, D.C., the nation's capital. What chance did a single fort have against their combined land and sea forces? They likely saw the dissension of Key as a minor, necessary inconvenience. But for Key, it was a pivotal, life-altering moment. He was about to witness a battle that would not only decide the fate of Baltimore, but would also inspire him to write the words that would come to define America itself. He stood on that deck, a helpless observer, as the sun began to set on September 1814. He knew that when the dawn came, it would bring with it the thunder of cannons and the flames of war. The next 24 hours would be a trial by fire, not just for the soldiers in Fort McHenry, but for the soul of the nation. And Francis Scott Key would be there to see it all, his mind and heart recording every flash of light, every roar of the cannonade. The stage was set for one of the most dramatic showdowns in American history. Join us next time as the bombardment of Fort McHenry begins, and we explore the terrifying, awe-inspiring experience that Francis Scott Key endured through that long and fateful night. It's a story of courage, desperation, and the dawn's early light. Thank you so much for watching. If you're enjoying this historical journey, please don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the next chapter. We'll see you then. The air hung heavy and thick over Baltimore Harbor, a suffocating blanket of humidity and anticipation. I stood on the deck of the truce ship, a reluctant observer caught between the lines of an impending conflict. The water, usually so alive with the comings and goings of commerce and life, was eerily still, its dark surface reflecting a sky bruised with the purples and grays of a gathering storm. It was the night of September 12, 1814. And the very atmosphere seemed to be holding its breath. My gaze was fixed on the formidable British fleet, a city of wooden giants anchored menacingly just beyond the harbor's reach. their masts scraped against the darkening heavens like skeletal fingers, a stark silhouette against the dying light. All day, I had watched them, a grim parade of warships, frigates, and bomb catches, each one a promise of destruction. Now, as twilight bled into night, their preparations became more frantic, more ominous. Lanterns flickered across their decks, casting ghostly glows on the faces of sailors moving with a grim purpose. I could just make out the dark, cylindrical shapes of Congreve rockets being loaded into their launching racks, their iron heads glinting malevolently in the sporadic lamplight. A chill, unrelated to the evening breeze, snaked its way down my spine. I was a guest here, a guest of the enemy. My mission of mercy to secure the release of my friend, Dr. Beans, now complete. Yet, we were not permitted to leave. We had seen too much, learned too much of their plans. We were to be spectators to the downfall of our own city. The British officers who had been my hosts, so civil and courteous just hours before, now wore masks of stern duty. Their polite conversation had been replaced by curt commands and the sharp, metallic clang of weaponry being readied. I turned my attention from the enemy to the shore, to the defiant bastion of Fort McHenry. It stood squat and determined, its earthen ramparts and brick walls, a symbol of American resolve. Even from this distance, I could see the feverish activity within. Men moved like ants, bolstering defenses, positioning cannons, and preparing for the hell that was about to be unleashed upon them. A massive flag, so large it seemed to require its own special breeze to stir, hung from the central pole. In the dimming light, its stars and stripes were a faint, but powerful, declaration of defiance. They knew what was coming. The entire city of Baltimore knew. The sounds carried across the water were a symphony of impending battle. Not the roar of cannons yet, but the prelude. The creak of block and tackle hoisting heavy munitions, the rhythmic thud of ramrods tamping powder, the shouted orders of officers echoing across the water, their voices sharp with urgency. From the British ships, I could hear the grinding of anchor chains as they adjusted their positions. Each movement, a careful calculation in the geometry of destruction. The Congreve rockets, weapons of terror as much as of war, were being arranged on their troughs, aimed like accusing fingers at the heart of the fort. These weren't just simple projectiles. They were designed to shriek and spiral through the air, trailing fire and smoke, spreading panic and chaos wherever they landed. I thought of the men inside Fort McHenry, many of them ordinary citizens, blacksmiths, farmers who had taken up arms to defend their homes. I pictured their faces, taut with a mixture of fear and determination. They were staring down the most powerful navy in the world. They were about to face a bombardment of a scale few had ever witnessed. What were their thoughts on this night before the storm? Were they writing last letters to loved ones? Were they offering quiet prayers? Or were they simply focused on the task at hand, their minds narrowed to the singular purpose of survival and defense? The sky grew darker still, the last vestiges of daylight finally surrendering to the night. The clouds, which had been gathering all evening, now completely obscured the moon and stars, plunging the harbor into a profound blackness. It was a perfect backdrop for the fireworks of war. The British lanterns seemed to burn brighter in the oppressive dark, pinpricks of hostile light in a sea of shadow. A sudden, cold gust of wind swept across the deck, carrying with it the smell of salt water and rain. It felt like a sigh from the heavens, a lament for the violence that was to come. My companion, Colonel Skinner, stood beside me, his face a grim, unreadable mask. We had spoken little since being told we would be detained. There was nothing to say. Our fate, and the fate of Baltimore, was out of our hands. We were trapped in a floating prison, forced to bear witness "They mean to level it, Francis," he murmured, his voice low and heavy. "They mean to leave nothing but rubble." I didn't reply. I just stared at the fort, a dark shape against a dark horizon, and felt a profound sense of helplessness wash over me. The British bomb catches, with their monstrous mortars, were particularly unsettling. These were not elegant ships of the line. They were squat, ugly vessels designed for a single, brutal purpose: to lob enormous, explosive shells in a high arc, to rain death from above. I watched as their crews made final adjustments. The great iron maws of the mortar angled towards the sky, ready to spew their devastating cargo. Each shell weighed over 200 pounds, a sphere of cast iron packed with gunpowder, capable of obliterating anything it struck. The thought of those shells crashing down into the cramped confines of the fort, among the brave men huddled there, was sickening. I found myself gripping the ship's railing, my knuckles white. A strange quiet fell over the harbor, a momentary pause in the preparations. It was the deepest, most profound silence I had ever experienced, heavier and more terrifying than any noise. It was the silence of a world holding its breath, the dead calm before the hurricane. In that moment, the weight of history felt palpable. This wasn't just a battle for a fort or a city. It was a battle for an idea, for the very survival of a young nation. I looked back towards Fort McHenry one last time before the first flash would inevitably split the night. The flag was no longer visible in the inky blackness, but I knew it was there. It had to be. It was the anchor for my hopes, and for the hopes of every soul in Baltimore. It was a promise, waiting in the darkness. The silence stretched on, each second an eternity. The air was electric, charged with unspoken threats and unyielding defiance. The night was poised, the stage was set, and the players were ready. The bombardment was about to begin. Thanks so much for tuning in. I hope you're enjoying this journey through a pivotal moment in history. If you're finding this story compelling, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing to the channel. It really helps us continue to bring these chapters to life. We'll be back soon with the next part of the story. Until then, take care. Welcome back to our journey through history. Tonight, we stand on the precipice of one of the most dramatic nights in American history. The night of September 13th, 1814. Picture the scene. The city of Baltimore holds its breath. The mighty British fleet, the most powerful navy in the world, has sailed up the Patapsco River. Their target? Fort McHenry, the star-shaped bastion, standing as the last line of defense for the city. Aboard a British ship, a young American lawyer named Francis Scott Key watches, his heart pounding in his chest. He's on a mission of negotiation, but now he's a captive audience to the terrifying spectacle about to unfold. He can see the fort's massive flag, a defiant symbol sewn by Mary Pickersgill and her team, waving in the twilight. It measures a colossal 30 by 42 feet, a clear message to the British that Baltimore will not surrender. As darkness blankets the sky, the assault begins. The British ships unleash a hellish symphony of destruction. Imagine the sound, a deafening, continuous roar that shakes the very foundations of the earth. The sky ignites with the fiery arcs of Congreve rockets, their trails painting the night with what Key would later call the rockets' red glare. These aren't just fireworks. They are weapons of terror, designed to demoralize and destroy. Then come the bombs, the heavy mortar shells, over 1,500 of them, each weighing up to 200 pounds, rain down upon Fort McHenry. They are the bombs bursting in air. Each explosion is a blinding flash, a thunderous crack that sends shrapnel screaming through the night. The air grows thick with smoke and the smell of gunpowder. For the 1,000 soldiers huddled inside the fort, under the command of Major George Armistead, it is a night of sheer terror, an unwavering resolve. From his vantage point on the water, Francis Scott Key can only watch and pray. Through the thick veil of smoke and the sporadic, violent flashes of light, he strains his eyes for a glimpse of the flag. Is it still there? Has the fort fallen? The bombardment rages for 25 relentless hours. The ground trembles. The air vibrates with a constant, terrifying hum of destruction. The British are throwing everything they have at the fort, confident that the sheer weight of their firepower will crush the American spirit. Inside Fort McHenry, it's a scene of organized chaos. Men scramble to extinguish fires sparked by the incendiary rockets. They tend to the wounded, their faces illuminated by the constant explosions. Despite the overwhelming onslaught, their discipline holds. Major Armistead walks the ramparts, his presence a steadying force amidst the storm of steel. He knows that as long as the flag flies, hope remains. The men know it, too. They fight not just for the fort, but for the city, for their families, and for the very idea of their young nation. The night feels endless. Each hour drags on, marked by the concussions of another round of shells. Key paces the deck of the British ship, his anxiety mounting with every passing moment. He cannot know the status of the defenders, only that they are enduring a punishment few could survive. The British commanders are just as tense. Their strategy was simple: overwhelm the fort, break its will, and sail on to capture Baltimore. But the fort isn't breaking. It's absorbing the punishment, standing defiant against the storm. As the hours crawl towards dawn, a heavy rain begins to fall, adding to the misery. The bombardment finally begins to the constant roar subsides into an eerie silence, broken only by the lapping of the water and the distant rumble of thunder. The air is thick and heavy, a suffocating blanket of smoke and fog. For Key, this is the most agonizing moment. In the darkness and the mist, he can see nothing. Has the fort surrendered? Has the flag been struck? Is the Union Jack now flying over the rampart? The minutes feel like an eternity. But then, slowly, agonizingly, the dawn begins to break. A faint, gray light filters through the morning mist. Key's eyes are fixed on the spot where he last saw the flag. He, along with every American who can see the fort, holds his breath. The smoke begins to clear. And then he sees it, tattered, torn, and singed by the fury of the night, but still there. The massive Star-Spangled Banner, waving proudly, defiantly, in the dawn's early light. The sight is overwhelming. A wave of relief, of pride, of profound emotion washes over Key. The fort has held. Baltimore is safe. The British assault has failed. In that moment of pure, unadulterated patriotism, the words begin to form in his mind. He pulls a letter from his pocket and begins to write, capturing the raw emotion of the night, the terror of the bombardment, and the incredible triumph of the morning. Oh, say, can you see? By the dawn's early light, he is writing the first verses of what will become the Star-Spangled Banner, the national anthem of the United States. The British, realizing their naval assault has been thwarted, and their land attack is also failing, have no choice but to withdraw. Their fleet sails away from Baltimore, defeated. The news spreads like wildfire. The defense of Fort McHenry becomes a symbol of American resilience and determination. The battle wasn't just a military victory, it was a profound moral victory. It proved that the young nation could stand against the greatest military power on earth and not just survive, but triumph. The story of that night, of the rocket's red glare and the bombs bursting in air, became immortalized in Key's poem. It's a story of courage under fire, of a community united in defense of its home, and of a flag that became more than just a piece of cloth. It became the embodiment of a nation's spirit, a testament to the idea that even in the darkest night, hope can endure, and a new day will dawn. The defense of Baltimore was a crucial turning point, boosting American morale and helping to pave the way for the end of the War of 1812. Thank you so much for joining us for this incredible story. The courage shown at Fort McHenry is a powerful reminder of the resilience of the human spirit. If you found this chapter of history as inspiring as I do, please hit that like button. And be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next episode. We'll see you next time. As the British fleet unleashes its fury upon Fort McHenry, a young lawyer named Francis Scott Key finds himself in a most unenviable position. He is aboard a British ship, a guest by negotiation, but a prisoner by circumstance, having just secured the release of an American doctor. Now, under the watchful eyes of his captors, he can only bear witness to the relentless bombardment of his homeland. The date is September 13th, 1814. The air crackles with the thunder of cannons and the whistle of Congreve rockets, their red glare painting hellish streaks across the twilight sky. From his vantage point on the water, Key watches the massive American flag, a defiant banner of 15 stars and 15 stripes, fluttering over the fort. It's a symbol of everything he holds dear, a testament to the young nation's will to survive. But as daylight surrenders to the blackness of night, his heart sinks. Rain begins to fall, a cold, miserable downpour that mixes with the acrid smoke from the cannons. The storm outside mirrors the tempest in Key's soul. He paces the deck, his eyes straining through the gloom. Each explosion that lights up the horizon is a hammer blow to his hopes. Is the fort still standing? Are his countrymen holding firm against this overwhelming force? The darkness is an unforgiving curtain, hiding the answers he so desperately seeks. Through the long, agonizing hours, the barrage continues without pause. The sounds are a symphony of destruction. The deep roar of the mortar, the splintering crash of timber, the terrifying hiss of rockets. Key can only imagine the chaos and terror within the fort's walls. He pictures the brave soldiers, caked in mud and gunpowder, fighting for their lives, for their families, for the very idea of America. Are they being overwhelmed? Has the moment of surrender finally come? He clutches the ship's rail, his knuckles white. Doubt, cold and sharp, begins to creep into his mind. The British are confident, their officers boasting that the fort will fall within hours. How can a small, earthen fort withstand such a pounding from the world's mightiest navy? It seems impossible. Every silent pause between explosions feels like an eternity, a terrifying void where his worst fears can take root. He asks a British sailor if the flag is still there. But in the pitch black, no one can say for sure. The weight of the moment is immense. This isn't just about a fort. It's about the future of a nation. If Baltimore falls, the heart of American commerce and spirit will be broken. The war could be lost. The dream of independence, fought for so fiercely just a generation ago, could be extinguished. Key feels the weight of history on his shoulders, a helpless observer to a pivotal moment he cannot influence. He finds himself praying, not with formal words, but with a raw, desperate plea from the depths of his being. A prayer for the dawn, a prayer for a sign, a prayer that the flag, that symbol of hope and defiance, has not been struck down in the night. He thinks of the men inside the fort, and his prayer extends to them for their courage, for their safety, for their endurance. He is one with them in spirit, sharing their long, dark vigil. The night wears on, a seemingly endless cycle of noise, light, and suffocating darkness. Keyes' emotions swing from hope to despair and back again. One moment, a lull in the firing gives him a sliver of optimism. Perhaps the British are running low on ammunition. The next, a renewed, ferocious assault dashes that hope to pieces. He is trapped in a limbo of uncertainty, his spirit stretched to the breaking point. As the first faint hint of gray begins to lighten the eastern sky, Keyes' heart pounds in his chest. This is the moment of truth. The bombardment, which had raged for over 25 hours, finally begins to subside. The air grows heavy with a tense, expectant silence, broken only by the lapping of water against the hull and the distant cries of gulls. The smoke and mist still hang thick over the harbor, a stubborn shroud concealing the fate of Fort McHenry. Slowly, agonizingly, the dawn breaks. The light seeps across the water, gradually revealing the outlines of the city, the harbor, and finally, the fort itself. Keyes' breath catches in his throat. He squints, his eyes aching from a sleepless night of watching and worrying. Is it there, through the haze, through the mists of the deep? Can he see it? And then he does. A flicker of red, a flash of white, a glimpse of blue, torn and tattered, but still there, still flying. The flag, the glorious Star-Spangled Banner, waves defiantly in the morning's early light. An overwhelming wave of relief, joy, and patriotic pride washes over him. They held. Against all odds, they held. In that moment of profound emotion, the words begin to form in his mind, a poem born from a long night of fear and a dawn of hope. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey into the past. If you found this story as moving as I do, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel for more chapters of history brought to life. We'll see you next time. Hello everyone, and welcome back to our historical journey. Today, we arrive at a pivotal moment, a scene etched into the very soul of a nation. Chapter 12. Dawn's Early Light. Imagine the scene. For over 25 agonizing hours, the sky over Baltimore has been a terrifying canvas of fire and smoke. The British, the world's most formidable naval power, have unleashed a relentless bombardment upon Fort McHenry. From the deck of a British ship, a small American delegation, including a lawyer named Francis Scott Key, has been forced to watch, their hearts heavy with dread. They are prisoners of circumstance, unable to fight, only to bear witness to what seems like the inevitable fall of their countrymen. Throughout the night, the darkness was punctuated by the terrifying red glare of rockets and the thunderous explosion of bombs bursting in air. Each blast was a question mark, a brutal inquiry into the fort's survival. Did that last one hit the powder magazine? Have the walls been breached? Are the men inside still standing? For Key and his companions, every second stretched into an eternity of suspense. They were too far to see the details, but close enough to feel the earth-shaking concussions and see the fiery arcs of destruction. The sheer volume of firepower was overwhelming, a testament to the might of the British Empire. It seemed impossible that any defense, let alone a lone American fort, could withstand such a furious and sustained assault. As the night wore on, the bombardment became their only reality. The constant roar was deafening, the flashes of light blinding. They would strain their eyes, trying to catch a glimpse of the fort's flag through the chaos. the one symbol of defiance. Sometimes they'd see it illuminated for a fleeting, hellish moment by the rocket's trail. But then, darkness and smoke would swallow it again, leaving them in a void of uncertainty. Think about the psychological toll of that night, the feeling of utter helplessness, of watching your home, your people, being pounded into submission, and being powerless to do anything but pray. Sleep was impossible. Hope was a flicker in a hurricane of fear. As the hours crawled by, the barrage began to slow. An eerie, unsettling quiet started to creep in. A silence almost more terrifying than the noise. Did it mean the British were finally giving up, their ammunition spent? Or did it mean the fort had finally fallen, its cannons silenced, its defenders overwhelmed? The silence offered no answers, only more questions hanging heavy in the damp, pre-dawn air. This is the moment we find ourselves in. The first faint fingers of dawn are beginning to stretch across the eastern sky, coloring the horizon a somber gray. A heavy mist, mingled with the acrid smoke of gunpowder, hangs thick over the Patapsco River, shrouding everything in a ghostly veil. On the deck of that truce ship, Francis Scott Key stands, his body exhausted, his nerves frayed raw. He raises a spyglass to his eye, his hands trembling slightly. His heart is pounding in his chest, a frantic drumbeat against the backdrop of the morning's quiet. He's not just looking for a fort. He's looking for an answer. He's looking for a sign that the ideals his young nation was built upon, resilience, the right to self-determination, have not been extinguished in the night. He is searching for proof that the sacrifice of the soldiers inside that fort was not in vain. The fate of Baltimore, and perhaps the very momentum of the war, hangs in the balance of what his spyglass will reveal. He points the lens toward the fort, but the view is obscured. The smoke and fog are a stubborn curtain, hiding the truth. He adjusts the focus, his breath held tight in his chest. The silence is absolute now. The entire world seems to be holding its breath with him. He needs to see one thing, one specific symbol that would tell him everything he needs to know. The massive 30 by 42-foot garrison flag that the fort's commander, Major George Armistead, had commissioned. A flag so large that the British would have no trouble seeing it from a distance. Slowly, agonizingly, a breeze begins to stir. It's a gentle breath of wind, but it's enough. The mist starts to part. The gray shroud of smoke begins to thin and drift away, like a curtain being drawn back on the stage of history. Key keeps the spyglass fixed, his eye pressed firmly against the lens. And then he sees it. First, it's just a flicker of color through the haze, a hint of red, a flash of white. His heart leaps. He steadies the glass, his focus sharpening. As the morning light grows stronger and the breeze does its work, the image becomes clearer. It's not just a color, it's a pattern. It's the familiar, beautiful pattern of stars and stripes. And it's not lying in the mud or torn down in surrender. It is flying majestically, defiantly. It is still there, waving proudly over the ramparts of Fort McHenry. Can you even begin to imagine the wave of emotion that must have crashed over him in that instant? It wasn't just relief. It was a profound, soul-stirring mix of awe, gratitude, and overwhelming pride. The flag was more than just cloth. It was a testament to the unbreakable spirit of the fort's defenders. It was a declaration that America had endured. It was a symbol of hope, miraculously preserved through a night of fire and fury. That flag, tattered but whole, told him the story of the night. It told him that the men of Fort McHenry had stood their ground against impossible odds. They had refused to break, refused to surrender. They had held the line. America had withstood the attack. In that singular, breathtaking moment, as the sun's first rays caught the vibrant colors of the banner, the anxiety and fear of the long night dissolved, replaced by a powerful surge of inspiration. Key, the lawyer and amateur poet, reached into his pocket, his mind already racing, trying to find words worthy of the incredible sight he had just witnessed. He began to scribble down phrases, capturing the image of that flag against the dawn's early light, giving birth to what would become a nation's anthem. The sight of that flag was not an ending, but a new beginning, a powerful symbol of resilience that would echo for generations. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into a truly defining moment. The story of our past is filled with these incredible instances of courage and hope. If you found this as moving as I did, please hit that like button, and be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next chapter. We'll see you next time. Imagine the scene. September 14th, 1814. The air, thick with the acrid smell of gunpowder, just hours before, is now still. Dawn is breaking, painting the sky in hues of gray and pale pink. On the deck of a British truce ship, a man strains his eyes, peering through the morning mist toward the shore of Baltimore. His name is Francis Scott Key, and his heart is pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. For 25 agonizing hours, he has been a helpless spectator to the relentless bombardment of Fort McHenry. He, along with Colonel John Stuart Skinner, had sailed under a flag of truce to negotiate the release of an American prisoner, Dr. William Beans. They were successful, but the British, fearing they had overheard plans for the attack on Baltimore, refused to let them return to shore. So they watched. They watched as the night was torn apart by the fiery arcs of bombshells and the terrifying glow of Congreve rockets. Each explosion was a hammer blow to their hopes. The fort, a lone bastion of American defiance, seemed so small, so vulnerable against the might of the world's most powerful navy. Through the long, dark hours, the only sign that the fort still stood was the periodic flash of its cannons, a defiant roar in the face of overwhelming force. But as the bombardment intensified, even those flashes grew sporadic, then ceased altogether. A dreadful silence fell, broken only by the lapping of waves against the hull and the distant cries of gulls. Key's mind raced through the darkest possibilities. Had the fort fallen, with the British now storming the city of Baltimore? Was this the end of their young republic's bold experiment? The silence was more terrifying than the cacophony of battle. It was a void, a question mark, hanging over the fate of his country. All he could do was wait for the dawn, his spirit teetering on a knife's edge between hope and despair. And then, as the first rays of sunlight pierced the gloom, he saw it. Through a spyglass, a shape began to emerge from the haze. It was a flag, not the Union Jack of the British, but a flag of immense size, stirring in the gentle morning breeze. It was tattered and torn from the night's assault, but it was unmistakably the Stars and Stripes. It was still there. It was still flying. The garrison had held. The fort had not surrendered. A wave of emotion so powerful it nearly buckled his knees washed over Francis Scott Key. It was a tidal wave of relief, of pride, of profound gratitude. The sight of that flag, a symbol of resilience and unwavering courage, was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. He had witnessed the impossible. He had seen a fledgling nation stare into the abyss and not blink. In that transcendent moment, something inside him broke free. An overwhelming urge to capture the scene, the feeling, the sheer miracle of it all, took hold of him. He fumbled in his pocket, his hands shaking, and pulled out a letter he'd been carrying. Turning it over on the clean space of the envelope, he began to write. He wasn't thinking like a lawyer anymore. He was thinking like a poet, a witness to history. The words didn't just come to him. They poured out of him, a torrent of emotion, translated into verse. He scribbled furiously, trying to keep up with the flood of images and feelings. The rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, the proof through the night that their flag was still there. He was capturing not just what he saw, but what it meant. Each line was a testament to the endurance of the human spirit and the defiant pride of a nation that refused to be broken. Oh, say can you see, by the dawn's early light, what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming. The opening lines were a question, the very question that had haunted him through the long night. But as he wrote, the question transformed into a declaration. He described the terrifying beauty of the battle, the desperate hope of the watchman, and the ultimate triumph of the flag. He wasn't just writing a poem. He was forging a legend. He was taking the raw, brutal reality of war and elevating it into a story of heroic perseverance. The ink on the envelope captured a moment frozen in time, a snapshot of a nation's soul. He continued to write as their ship was finally allowed to return to Baltimore, the words flowing as freely as his tears of relief. When he finally set foot on solid ground again, the city of Baltimore was in a state of euphoria. The news of the victory at Fort McHenry had spread like wildfire. The improbable had happened. Key, his heart still soaring, checked into a local inn, the Indian Queen Hotel. The poem, the raw scribbles from the back of the envelope, consumed him. He knew it wasn't finished. He sat down and began to refine it, to polish the lines, to ensure every word carried the weight of the moment he had witnessed. He crafted 4 stanzas, in total, a complete narrative arc from the desperate anxiety of the night to the triumphant relief of the morning. And finally, a prayer for the future of this land of the free and home of the brave. He titled his work simply, The Defense of Fort McHenry. He had no grand ambitions for it. It was a personal, visceral response to an extraordinary event. He just wanted to share the feeling, to let others see what he had seen. Once he was satisfied, Key showed the poem to his brother, Judge Joseph H. Nicholson. Nicholson had served as a commander at Fort McHenry and immediately recognized the power and patriotism in Key's words. He saw that it wasn't just a poem. It was an anthem waiting to be sung. He noted that the meter of the poem perfectly matched a popular tune of the day, a well-known British song called To Anacreon in Heaven. It was a melody every American would recognize. Wasting no time, Nicholson took the poem to a local printer. Anonymous handbills were quickly printed and circulated throughout Baltimore. The poem was an instant sensation. It perfectly captured the city's, and indeed the nation's, collective feeling of pride and relief. It gave voice to the very emotions that so many were struggling to express. Newspapers from Baltimore to Georgia to New Hampshire soon picked it up and reprinted it. The title, The Defense of Fort McHenry, was often accompanied by the note, Tune, Anacreon in Heaven. People began singing it in taverns and at public gatherings. An actor in Baltimore sang it on stage, giving it a new, more memorable name. The Star-Spangled Banner. The song spread across the country, a viral hit in an age long before the internet. It became a patriotic staple, a musical embodiment of American identity and resilience. A poem born from the heart of a man overwhelmed by relief on the deck of a ship, written on the back of a stray envelope, had taken on a life of its own. It had become the voice of a nation. And so, from the fire and fury of a single battle, a lasting symbol of American patriotism was born. Francis Scott Key, the lawyer and amateur poet, had unintentionally given his country one of its most powerful and enduring gifts. He didn't seek fame or glory. He simply sought to express an inexpressible moment of grace, but in doing so, he captured the essence of the American spirit of endurance, hope, and a fierce, unwavering love for the flag and the republic for which it stands. Over a century later, in 1931, President Herbert Hoover would sign an act officially adopting the Star-Spangled Banner as the national anthem of the United States. A poem scribbled in haste had become the song of a nation, a permanent reminder of the night a flag and a country refused to fall. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this piece of history, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel for more stories like this. We'll see you next time. Hello and welcome back to our journey. Last time, we left Francis Scott Key with a heart full of emotion and a head full of powerful words. Having just finished his poem about the incredible defense of Fort McHenry, today, in Chapter 14, we rewind to see how those words leaped off the page and into the heart of a nation. So, picture this. Key gets back to Baltimore. The city is buzzing with relief and pride. He polishes his poem, and his brother-in-law, a local judge, immediately recognizes its power. He knows this isn't just a poem. It's a story that every American needs to hear. He takes it to a printer, and soon, handbills with the title Defense of Fort McHenry are being passed around the city. Imagine this scene. People in taverns, in their homes, on street corners, reading these lines for the first time. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light? ... It must have sent shivers down their spines, capturing the exact feeling of hope and defiance they all shared. The poem was an instant hit. It was so relatable, so powerful, that local newspapers, like the Baltimore Patriot and the American, couldn't wait to publish it. Within days, it spread like wildfire. From Baltimore, it traveled up and down the coast, appearing in newspapers in Georgia, New Hampshire, and everywhere in between. The country was captivated by this vivid, first-hand account of American resilience. But reading it was one thing. The real magic happened when a melody was added. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. The poem didn't have its own music. People needed a tune to sing it to, and they found the perfect one in a very popular and somewhat surprising place. There was a well-known British song at the time called To Anacreon in Heaven. It was the official song of a gentlemen's amateur music club in London called the Anacreontic Society. It was a lively, social tune that pretty much everyone knew. The melody was catchy, it had a wide vocal range, and it was perfect for a group singing. Someone, and history isn't exactly clear on who, had the brilliant idea to pair Key's powerful words with this familiar, rousing tune. It was a perfect match. The soaring melody beautifully complemented the poem's triumphant and emotional themes. Actors and singers in Baltimore began performing it this way in taverns and on stage. Can you imagine being in one of those packed taverns? Hearing it for the first time. The energy must have been electric. The words they had just read in the paper were now a song, a shared anthem of their recent victory. This new song and poem combination was unstoppable. Soldiers sang it in their camps, families sang it in their homes, and it was performed at public celebrations. It wasn't just Baltimore's song anymore. It belonged to the entire nation. It tapped into a deep well of patriotism that was surging through the country during the War of 1812. The war was tough, and the burning of Washington, D.C. had been a low point. But the defense of Baltimore and this new song gave people something to rally around. It was a symbol of their grit, their ability to stand firm against a global superpower. The song's journey, from a personal poem scribbled on the back of a letter to a national sensation, was remarkably fast. It wasn't a formal process. It was organic. It grew from the people themselves. It was the 19th century equivalent of a viral hit. The poem gave voice to a feeling, and the music gave that voice wings. It captured the spirit of the moment so perfectly that it became intertwined with the identity of the young American nation. And as the years went by, its popularity only grew. It became a staple at patriotic events, especially on the 4th of July. People started calling it the Star-Spangled Banner, a much catchier title than Defense of Fort McHenry, don't you think? That iconic phrase from the first stanza just stuck. It wasn't just a song about one battle anymore. It became a song about America itself, about freedom, perseverance, and the enduring symbol of the flag. It's incredible to think how a moment of inspiration on a ship in the middle of a battle could transform into a poem, and then with the help of a popular British tune, become the song that would one day define a nation. It shows the power of art to capture a moment in time and unite people in a shared experience. What started as one man's personal reflection became a chorus sung by millions. And that's where we'll leave it for today. The journey of the Star-Spangled Banner is far from over, but its transformation from poem to song was a crucial, defining chapter. Next time, we'll explore how this beloved patriotic song officially became the national anthem of the United States. It's a story with its own set of interesting twists and turns. Thank you so much for joining me for this chapter. If you're enjoying this deep dive into history, please give this video a thumbs up, and do you want to forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you won't miss our next episode. We love having you as part of our community. See you next time. Hello everyone, and welcome back to our historical journey. Today, we're diving into chapter 15. The symbolism of the flag. We'll explore how a simple piece of fabric, battered and torn in the heat of battle, transformed into one of the most powerful symbols in American history. Let's set the scene. It's the morning of September 14th, 1814. The smoke is clearing over Fort McHenry in Baltimore. For 25 agonizing hours, British warships have relentlessly bombarded the American fort. On a ship in the harbor, a young lawyer named Francis Scott Key strains his eyes, looking for one thing: the American flag, had it been lowered in surrender. As the dawn's early light breaks through the haze, he sees it. The massive flag, the Star-Spangled Banner, is still there, waving defiantly. That single moment, that visual confirmation of survival, was electrifying. It wasn't just about winning a battle. It was about the nation itself enduring against overwhelming odds. The flag, in that instant, ceased to be just a military standard. It became a living, breathing symbol of American resilience. Key's poem, which would later become the national anthem, captured this profound shift. He didn't just see a flag. He saw the very spirit of the country embodied in its stars and stripes. Before this moment, the flag was certainly a symbol of the young republic, but its emotional weight wasn't as deeply ingrained in the public consciousness. The War of 1812, often called the Second War of Independence, was a crucial test for the United States. Could this collection of disparate states truly hold together? Could it defend its sovereignty? The sight of the flag over Fort McHenry was the answer. It was a resounding yes. For the soldiers in the fort, for the citizens of Baltimore, And soon, for the entire nation, the flag meant survival. It was a testament to their collective will to not just exist, but to persevere. This idea of survival quickly intertwined with the concept of freedom. The war was fought, in part, over the right of the United States to trade freely and to have its sailors respected on the high seas. The British practice of impressment forcing American sailors into the Royal Navy was a direct assault on personal liberty and national sovereignty. So, when that flag continued to fly, it wasn't just a military victory, it was a victory for freedom. It symbolized a nation that refused to be bullied, a people determined to chart their own course, free from the dictates of a foreign power. Each star and each stripe seemed to shout that this was a land where freedom was not just an ideal, but a right worth defending to the death. The flag became a promise of liberty, not just for those born in America, but for all who sought refuge on its shores. It represented the freedom to speak your mind, to worship as you please, and to pursue your own destiny. This symbolism resonated deeply, turning the flag into a beacon of hope for people around the world. It was a visual shorthand for the entire American experiment, a bold declaration that a government of the people, by the people, for the people could and would endure. Perhaps the most powerful transformation was the flag's emergence as a symbol of unity. Remember, in the early 19th century, the United States was still a fragile entity. Strong regional identities and political divisions often threatened to pull the country apart. People thought of themselves as Virginians or New Yorkers first, and Americans second. The War of 1812, and the Star-Spangled Banner at its heart, helped forge a stronger national identity. When news of the victory at Baltimore spread, it wasn't just a Maryland victory, it was an American victory. The flag that flew over Fort McHenry belonged to everyone. It represented the farmer in Massachusetts, the merchant in Charleston, and the frontiersman in Ohio. It transcended state lines and political squabbles. It reminded everyone that they were part of something larger than themselves. In its broad stripes and bright stars, Americans saw their shared sacrifice and their common purpose. It became the thread that tied the diverse tapestry of the nation together, a constant reminder of the motto, E pluribus unum, out of many, one. Following the war, the actual flag from Fort McHenry began its journey to becoming a national treasure. The commander of the fort, Lieutenant Colonel George Armistead, kept the flag. His family understood its significance and carefully preserved it, occasionally showing it to esteemed guests. They knew they weren't just holding onto a piece of cloth. They were the custodians of a sacred relic. People traveled to see it, to touch a piece of the history they had only read about. It was the physical manifestation of the nation's perilous fight. In 1907, Armistead's grandson, Aben Appleton, recognized that this symbol belonged to the entire nation. He loaned it to the Smithsonian Institution, and in 1912, he made the gift permanent. He wanted to ensure that the flag that had inspired the national anthem would be preserved for all future generations of Americans to see. It was placed on public display, becoming a centerpiece of the National Museum. The flag itself, with its scars and missing pieces, told a story more powerful than any book could. Each tear and frayed edge was a testament to the struggle for the nation's survival. Today, the Star-Spangled Banner rests in a specially designed, climate-controlled chamber at the National Museum of American History. Millions of visitors file past it each year in quiet reverence. They gaze upon the very flag that Francis Scott Key saw on that fateful morning. It's a tangible link to the past, a connection to a moment when the nation's future hung in the balance. The symbolism born in the smoke of battle over 200 years ago remains potent. The flag still represents survival against all odds, the preciousness of freedom, and the enduring quest for unity in a diverse nation. It is a symbol that has been carried into other battles, planted on the moon, and draped over the coffins of fallen heroes. It has been waved in celebration and burned in protest. Its meaning is constantly being debated and reinterpreted, yet its core symbolism, forged in the fire of 1814, endures. The Star-Spangled Banner is more than a flag. It is the story of America, written in thread and colored with the ideals of survival, freedom, and unity. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into the symbolism of the American flag. It's a story that continues to inspire. If you found this interesting, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more explorations of our shared history. We'll see you in the next chapter. Welcome back to our journey through the history of the national anthem. Today, in Chapter 6, we're diving into what I call the forgotten years. It's a fascinating period, a sort of long historical limbo for the Star-Spangled Banner. Imagine writing a song that you know is special, a song that captures a pivotal moment for a nation, only to see it become just one of many patriotic tunes. Not yet the asterisk tune. That's exactly what happened for nearly a century. After the War of 1812, the Star-Spangled Banner didn't just vanish. It found a life of its own. But it was a quiet, unofficial one. It became a familiar melody at patriotic events, played by military bands, and sung at 4th of July celebrations. It was popular, certainly, but it wasn't the undisputed king of patriotic music. Think of it like a popular local band that everyone in town loves, but they haven't gotten that big record deal yet. Other songs, like Hail, Columbia, and My Country, 'Tis of Thee, were just as, if not more, popular and often served the role of a de facto anthem. So, how did it survive? How did it hang on through all those years, waiting for its moment? One of the biggest reasons was its adoption by the U.S. military. By the 1890s, both the Army and the Navy had officially mandated that the Star-Spangled Banner be played at flag-raising ceremonies. This was a huge step. It meant that every day, on bases and ships around the world, our service members were saluting the flag to this specific tune. This embedded the song deep within the military's culture and traditions. It created a powerful, daily ritual that linked the song directly to the flag and to the very idea of national service and sacrifice. This military connection was especially crucial during times of conflict. As the nation navigated the immense tragedy of the Civil War, both Union and Confederate sides, in their own ways, looked for symbols of identity, while the Union Army increasingly used the Star-Spangled Banner. It was the song's story of endurance through a fiery trial that resonated. It was a musical reminder of the nation's resilience, a promise that the flag would still be there in the morning. Later, during the Spanish-American War, its popularity surged again. Playing the anthem became a way to rally public support and express national pride during a time of international conflict. But it wasn't just the military. The song began to weave its way into the fabric of civilian life. Slowly but surely, one of the most important places this happened was in schools. As the 19th century turned into the 20th, a growing movement for public education also brought a new emphasis on teaching patriotism. What better way to do that than with music? Children across the country started learning the Star-Spangled Banner in their classrooms. They sang it at school assemblies, memorized its verses, and learned the story of Francis Scott Key. For generations of Americans, this was their first real introduction to the anthem. This educational push ensured that the song was passed down, creating a shared cultural touchstone for millions. And then there were the ceremonies, from the dedication of monuments to the opening of major public events like the World's Fairs. The Star-Spangled Banner was increasingly the go-to piece. It added a sense of gravity and historical weight to these occasions. When the band struck up those familiar first notes, it was a signal that something important was happening, something connected to the larger story of America. It wasn't the law yet, but it was becoming a powerful tradition. It's also important to remember the song's challenging nature, that wide vocal range we all struggle with today. It was just as hard back then, but in a way, that difficulty added to its mystique. To sing it well was a feat, a performance, and this led to it being featured at major sporting events, where a powerful rendition could stir the crowd and create a moment of collective unity before the game even began. The first documented instance of it being played at a baseball game was in 1862, but its regular pairing with sports, especially baseball, truly cemented its place in popular American culture during the 1918 World Series. So, these weren't forgotten years in the sense that the song disappeared. They were incubation years through the steadfast tradition of the military, the daily lessons in schools, and its presence at public ceremonies and sporting events. The Star-Spangled Banner patiently waited in the wings. It was a period where the song proved its staying power, not through an act of Congress, but through the will of the people and the institutions that reflected their values. It became a part of the American soundscape, a familiar echo of defiance and hope. This long, slow burn is what made its eventual adoption as the official national anthem in 1931 feel less like a new decision and more like the formal recognition of a reality that had been building for over 100 years. The song had earned its place, not overnight, but through decades of quiet, persistent service. Thanks for watching this chapter of our story. It's a great reminder that sometimes the most important things take time to be fully recognized. If you enjoyed this deep dive, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our next chapter. We'll see you then. Hello everyone, and welcome back to our channel. Have you ever stood in a stadium, hand over your heart, as the first notes of the Star-Spangled Banner begin to play? It's a powerful moment, one that unites millions of Americans. But have you ever wondered how this particular song, born from a fiery battle, became the official anthem of the United States? It's a story filled with patriotism, persistence, and a healthy dose of public debate. Today, we're diving into Chapter 17 of our series, The Rise of the National Anthem. We'll uncover the long and winding road Francis Scott Key's poem traveled, from a battlefield observation to the law of the land. So, grab a seat, and let's explore how a song about a flag became the ultimate symbol of a nation. Before the Star-Spangled Banner, several other patriotic songs vied for the nation's affection. Tunes like Hail, Columbia, My Country, 'Tis of Thee, and Yankee Doodle were all popular and often played at public events. Hail, Columbia, in particular, served as a de facto anthem for much of the 19th century. It was dignified, patriotic, and widely recognized. So, what made the Star-Spangled Banner stand out from the rest? While these other songs were beloved, they often spoke of general patriotic feelings or historical events from the Revolutionary War. The Star-Spangled Banner was different. It was a raw eyewitness account of a pivotal moment in the War of 1812, capturing a feeling of defiant survival and resilience that resonated deeply with the American spirit. Its lyrics painted a vivid picture of struggle and triumph, a narrative that felt both immediate and timeless. This emotional intensity and specific historical anchor gave it a unique power that would eventually propel it past its competitors. The song's journey from a popular tune to an official symbol really began with the U.S. military. Throughout the latter half of the 19th century, the Star-Spangled Banner grew in popularity within military circles. Its themes of perseverance and the symbolic power of the flag made it a natural fit for formal ceremonies. By the 1890s, the U.S. Navy had officially mandated that the song be played at the raising and lowering of the colors. This was a significant step. The Army soon followed suit. By the early 1900s, it had become standard practice for all branches of the armed forces to use the song for official flag ceremonies. This military adoption was crucial. It lent the song a level of official dignity and respect that it hadn't previously possessed. Every time a soldier or sailor saluted the flag while the Star-Spangled Banner played, the song became more deeply intertwined with the official identity of the United States. It was no longer just a popular song. It was the soundtrack to American military honor and duty. This daily, formal repetition cemented its status as the nation's premier patriotic hymn. This military endorsement created a powerful ripple effect. As soldiers and veterans returned to civilian life, they brought with them the tradition of standing in respect for the song. This practice began to spread to public events, especially sporting events. One of the most famous instances was during the 1918 World Series between the Boston Red Sox and the Chicago Cubs. During the seventh-inning stretch of Game 1, a military band played the Star-Spangled Banner. The crowd, filled with a patriotic fervor fueled by World War I, rose to its feet and sang along. The reaction was so overwhelmingly positive that the owner of the Red Sox decided to have the anthem played at every remaining home game. The tradition caught on, and soon, playing the anthem before sporting events became a common practice across the country. This transition from a purely military ceremony to a beloved public ritual was a major turning point. It brought the song into the daily lives of millions of Americans, transforming it into a shared, communal experience of national pride. Despite its widespread popularity and military endorsement, the Star-Spangled Banner was still not the official national anthem. That would take a dedicated, decades-long campaign. The movement was spearheaded by patriotic organizations like the Veterans of Foreign Wars, VFW, and the Daughters of the American Revolution. They believed the country needed a single, officially recognized anthem to represent its unity and values. One of the most passionate advocates was John Philip Sousa, the famous composer and bandmaster known as the March King. Sousa argued that the song's spirit of patriotism was unmatched and that its melody was stirring and powerful. He composed various arrangements of the anthem, helping to popularize it and present it in a grand orchestral fashion suitable for a national symbol. However, the path to official recognition wasn't without its obstacles. Not everyone was convinced that the Star-Spangled Banner was the right choice. Critics raised several valid points. First, the melody, which was borrowed from an old British gentleman's club song called To Anacreon in Heaven, was notoriously difficult to sing. Its wide vocal range, jumping from low notes to high notes, challenged even professional singers, let alone the average citizen. Some argued that a national anthem should be easily singable by everyone. Others took issue with the lyrics. They pointed out that the song focused on a single military event and that some of the later lesser-known verses contained aggressive, martial language that they felt didn't represent the nation's peaceful ideals. Prohibitionists also disliked the tune's origins as a drinking song. Alternative suggestions were proposed, including America the Beautiful, which many felt offered a more inclusive and poetic vision of the country. celebrating its natural beauty and democratic ideals. The debate was lively and passionate, with strong arguments on both sides. Despite the opposition, the campaign for the Star-Spangled Banner continued to gain momentum. The key figure in pushing the legislation through Congress was Representative John Charles Linthicum of Maryland. It was fitting that a representative from the state where the song was born would lead the final charge. Starting in 1918, Linthicum repeatedly introduced bills to make the song the official anthem. For over a decade, his efforts were met with debate and delay. But public support, fueled by veterans groups and patriotic societies, was overwhelming. They organized a massive petition that gathered over 5 million signatures in favor of the bill. They argued that the song had earned its place through more than a century of tradition and had been consecrated by the respect of the armed forces. They brought singers to congressional hearings to perform the song and demonstrate that, while challenging, it could be sung with passion and dignity. This combination of grassroots pressure and persistent political effort was relentless. Finally, after years of debate and campaigning, the moment arrived. On March 3, 1931, after passing through both the House and the Senate, the bill was signed into law by President Herbert Hoover. The Star-Spangled Banner was officially declared the national anthem of the United States. It was a victory for tradition and for the millions of Americans who already considered it their anthem in their hearts. The law solidified what had already become a cultural reality. The long journey, from Francis Scott Key's frantic scribbling on the back of a letter aboard a British ship, through decades of military tradition and public adoption, had reached its destination. The song that celebrated the survival of a single flag through a night of bombardment was now the permanent symbol of the nation's enduring spirit. Its complex history, filled with debate and passion, is a testament to the song's powerful hold on the American imagination. It wasn't chosen because it was easy. It was chosen because it was meaningful. And so, the next time you hear those familiar opening notes, "Oh, say can you see," you'll know the incredible story behind them. It's not just a song. It's a piece of living history. It's a reminder of a moment of national peril and survival, a symbol of military honor, and the result of a democratic debate that spanned decades. It represents the long and sometimes difficult process of how a nation chooses its symbols and defines its identity. From the ramparts of Fort McHenry to every ballpark and school assembly in the country, the Star-Spangled Banner continues to tell a story of resilience, of a flag still there, and a nation still standing. Thank you so much for joining us for this chapter in American history. I hope you found this story as fascinating as I do. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to our channel for more deep dives into the past. Don't forget to hit that notification bell so you won't miss our next episode. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. What does the national anthem mean to you? Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time. Hey everyone, and welcome back to our series. Today, we're diving into the final chapter of a remarkable story, exploring the life of the man who gave America its national anthem. We all know the song, but what about the man, Francis Scott Key, after the smoke cleared at Fort McHenry? What became of the lawyer and poet who penned the Star-Spangled Banner? Let's uncover the enduring legacy of Francis Scott Key. After the War of 1812, Key returned to his life not as a celebrated national hero, but as a respected lawyer and family man. He resumed his thriving legal practice in Georgetown, and his reputation for integrity and eloquence grew. He wasn't one to seek the spotlight. In fact, for years, many people didn't even know he was the author of the famous poem. It was initially published anonymously, titled Defense of Fort McHenry. It was Key's brother-in-law who revealed his identity. And even then, the poem's journey to becoming the national anthem was a long and gradual one. Key argued several significant cases before the Supreme Court, becoming one of the most prominent attorneys of his era. He was appointed U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia by President Andrew Jackson, a position he held for nearly a decade. His legal career was marked by a deep commitment to the law, but it was also intertwined with the most divisive issue of his time. It's a complex part of his story, and to understand the man fully, we have to look at it honestly. Key was a product of his time, a slaveholder himself, yet he also represented enslaved people seeking their freedom in court, sometimes for free. He was also a founding member of the American Colonization Society, which promoted the idea of resettling free African Americans in Africa. This part of his legacy is complicated and reflects the deep-seated contradictions of early American society. It's a reminder that historical figures are rarely simple heroes or villains. They are complex people navigating the moral landscapes of their day. But perhaps the most profound influence on Key's life, shaping his actions and his words, was his deep and abiding Christian faith. He was a devout Episcopalian, active in his church throughout his life. This faith wasn't just a private matter. It was the bedrock of his worldview. It informed his sense of justice, his compassion, and his understanding of the world. If you look closely at the lyrics of the Star-Spangled Banner, you can see this influence, especially in the lesser-known fourth stanza. It speaks of a heavenly rescued land, praising the power that has made and preserved the nation. The final line, "In God is our trust," became the foundation for the official motto of the United States. "In God we trust," which was adopted in 1956. His faith gave him a sense of purpose and a belief in a higher calling for his country. Beyond the anthem, Key was also a poet and a hymn writer. He wrote several religious hymns, including "Lord, with glowing heart I'd praise Thee." These works, while not as famous, offer another window into his soul, revealing a man of deep spiritual conviction and contemplation. His poetry often explored themes of faith, patriotism, and the beauty of the natural world. He saw the hand of a creator in the world around him and believed that the nation as survival was a testament to divine providence. This perspective is woven throughout his writings and gives us a richer understanding of the man behind the anthem. He wasn't just a patriot, he was a man who believed his country had a sacred destiny. Francis Scott Key passed away from pneumonia in 1843 at the age of 63, long before his poem was officially designated the national anthem by Congress in 1931. He was buried in Baltimore, and his legacy continued to grow. Monuments were erected in his honor, including the one at Fort McHenry and another in Golden Gate Park, San Francisco. His home in Georgetown stood as a landmark for many years before it was unfortunately demolished. But his most enduring monument, of course, is his song. Think about it. How many other poems from the early 19th century are known, word for word, by millions of people today? The Star-Spangled Banner has become more than just a song. It's a cornerstone of American identity. It's played before sporting events, at presidential inaugurations, and on national holidays. It's a symbol of resilience, a reminder of a moment when the nation's future hung in the balance, and the flag, that symbol of hope, was still there. It has been sung by artists from all walks of life, in styles ranging from classic opera to rock and roll. Each performance adds a new layer of meaning, reflecting the ever-changing face of America itself. The song has been a source of unity during times of crisis and a focal point for debate during times of social change. Its meaning continues to be interpreted and reinterpreted by each new generation. And that, ultimately, is the power of Key's legacy. He captured a single, powerful moment in a bottle, the anxiety of a long night, the relief of the dawn, and the profound symbolism of that tattered but triumphant flag. His words gave voice to a feeling of national pride and perseverance that has resonated through the centuries. They remind us of the struggles the nation has faced and the ideals it continues to strive for. While Key himself was a complex figure, a man of his time with all its contradictions, the words he wrote have transcended him. They have become part of the shared story of every American, a lyrical thread connecting the past to the present. His legacy isn't just in the historical facts of his life, his legal career, or his personal beliefs. It's in the emotion that swells in a stadium when thousands of people sing together. It's in the quiet pride felt during a solemn ceremony. Francis Scott Key gave America its voice for moments of reflection and celebration. He gave us words that, for over 200 years, have helped define what it means to be an American. His enduring legacy is the song that continues to echo, a testament to the idea that even in the darkest night, there is hope in the dawn, and that the flag of a free people can and will endure. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey through the life and legacy of Francis Scott Key. It's a story with layers of history, faith, and complexity, but at its heart, it's a story about the power of words to shape a nation. If you enjoyed this deep dive, please give this video a thumbs up and consider subscribing to the channel for more stories like this. We love hearing from you, so drop a comment below with your thoughts. Until next time, take care. Hello history lovers and welcome back to our channel. Today, we're taking a journey to a place where American history was forged in the fire of battle, a place that continues to inspire patriotism and Fort McHenry. So, grab your virtual walking shoes, because we're about to explore the fort as it stands today. Standing proudly at the mouth of Baltimore's Inner Harbor, Fort McHenry is more than just a historic site. It's a national monument and historic shrine, a testament to the resilience and spirit of a young nation. When you step onto these grounds, you're walking in the footsteps of the brave soldiers who defended this very spot over 200 years ago. It's a powerful feeling, knowing you're on hallowed ground. The fort itself is beautifully preserved. Its star-shaped design, a classic example of military architecture from its time, is immediately recognizable. As you walk through the brick archways and into the central parade ground, you can almost hear the echoes of the past, the orders being shouted, the rumble of cannons, the determined footsteps of the garrison. The barracks, the powder magazine, and the officers' quarters have been carefully maintained, offering a glimpse into the daily life of a soldier during the War of 1812. You can explore these buildings, imagining what it was like to live and serve here, waiting for a battle that would decide the fate of your city. One of the most moving parts of any visit is seeing the flagpole. This isn't just any flagpole. This is the very spot where the original Star-Spangled Banner flew in defiant victory on the morning of September 14, 1814. Every day, park rangers conduct a flag-raising ceremony, hoisting a replica of that famous flag. It's a tradition that connects the present directly to that pivotal moment in history. Watching that enormous flag catch the wind against the backdrop of the Baltimore skyline is a truly breathtaking experience. It makes you understand, on a visceral level, what Francis Scott Key must have felt. And speaking of the flag, let's talk about the star of the show. While the original, battle-worn flag that inspired our national anthem is now carefully preserved and displayed at the Smithsonian's National Museum of American History in Washington, D.C., its legacy is everywhere at Fort McHenry. Inside the visitor center, you'll find incredible exhibits that tell the story of the flag and the anthem. There are artifacts, interactive displays, and a powerful film that brings the Battle of Baltimore to life. But the centerpiece, for many visitors, is the chance to see a hands-on replica of the great Garrison flag. And folks, when I say full size, I mean it. This flag is a colossal 30 by 42 feet. That's bigger than a city bus. Each of its 15 stars measures 2 feet across. Standing next to it, you truly grasp the immense scale of what Mary Pickersgill and her team created. It was intentionally made to be massive, so that the British Navy, stationed miles away in the bay, could have no doubt that the fort had not surrendered. Seeing this replica, you can appreciate the sheer audacity and confidence it represented. It wasn't just a flag, it was a declaration. The fort isn't just a static museum, though. It's a living, breathing place. Throughout the year, especially in the summer, the grounds come alive with historical reactions. You might see soldiers in period uniforms drilling on the parade ground, or hear the thunderous roar of a cannon demonstration. These living history programs make the experience so much more immersive. It's one thing to read about history, but it's another thing entirely to see, hear, and even smell it. These dedicated volunteers bring the past to life, answering questions and sharing stories that you won't find in any textbook. Beyond the military history, Fort McHenry is also a beautiful park. The grounds surrounding the fort offer stunning views of the Patapsco River and the Baltimore Harbor. It's a popular spot for locals and tourists alike to walk, jog, or simply sit and enjoy the scenery. The juxtaposition is striking. A peaceful, green space surrounding a place of intense conflict. It serves as a reminder that peace is the hard-won prize of the sacrifices made here. Visiting Fort McHenry today is a multi-layered experience. It's a history lesson, a patriotic pilgrimage, and a chance to reflect on the meaning of our nation's symbols. You come for the story of the anthem, but you leave with a much deeper appreciation for the people who lived that story. You see the cramped barracks and realize the discomfort the soldiers endured. You stand on the ramparts where they faced a terrifying naval bombardment and feel a sense of their courage. You look at that massive flag and understand the hope it symbolized in a moment of darkness. It reminds us that our national anthem wasn't written during a time of peace and celebration. It was written in a moment of extreme uncertainty and danger, born from the smoke and fire of battle. The song itself is a question. Oh, say does that Star-Spangled Banner yet wave? It asks if our ideals, our nation, our flag, still endure. And here, at Fort McHenry, the answer echoes through the centuries. Yes, it does. For anyone interested in American history, or for anyone who has ever felt a lump in their throat while hearing the Star-Spangled Banner, a trip to Fort McHenry is an absolute must. It connects you to a foundational moment in our country's story in a way that is both educational and deeply emotional. It's a place that continues to fulfill its mission, to inspire patriotism and to commemorate the defense of Baltimore and the birth of our national anthem. It's not just a monument made of brick and earth. It's a monument to the enduring spirit of a nation. Thank you so much for joining me on this virtual tour of Fort McHenry today. It's a place that truly has to be seen to be believed. If you enjoyed this journey into the past, please give this video a thumbs up. And do you not forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you won't miss our next historical adventure. Until next time, stay curious. We've journeyed through the dramatic birth of a song, from the smoke-filled dawn of a battlefield to its adoption as a nation's anthem. But as we reach the end of our story, it is crucial to understand that this anthem is far more than just a historical relic or a melody played before sporting events. It's a living, breathing testament to the very soul of a nation. Think about it. This song was born from a moment of profound uncertainty, a moment where the future hung precariously in the balance. It wasn't written in a peaceful study or a grand hall. It was conceived amidst the chaos and fear of conflict, its lyrics illuminated by the rocket's red glare and the bombs bursting in air. That origin imbues it with a power that few other national songs possess. It's a story of survival. Every time we hear those notes, we are connected to that very moment of defiance. We are reminded that the dawn did come, that the flag was still there. This isn't just about celebrating a military victory from centuries ago. It's a celebration of endurance itself. It's a reminder that even in the darkest of nights, hope can persist. The anthem's message transcends that single battle. It has been sung by generations, each facing its own unique trials and tribulations. It was sung by soldiers in foreign lands, by activists marching for civil rights, by pioneers pushing into new frontiers, and by ordinary citizens grappling with economic hardship and social change. In each of these contexts, the song took on new meaning, yet its core message remained the same. We have endured before, and we will endure again. It speaks to a fundamental truth about freedom. Freedom isn't a one-time prize that, once won, can be placed on a shelf and forgotten. The anthem teaches us that it's a constant vigil. The land of the free and the home of the brave are just descriptions. They are a challenge. They are ideals that must be continually strived for, protected, and defended by every generation. The bravery mentioned isn't just the courage of a soldier on the battlefield. It's the courage to speak out against injustice, the courage to innovate and build a better future, the courage to engage in difficult conversations, and the courage to hold on to hope when despair seems overwhelming. It's the quiet, everyday bravery of citizens who work to make their communities and their country a better place. This song is a mirror, reflecting the nation's journey, its triumphs, its struggles, its moments of unity, and its periods of division. It has been a source of immense pride and, at times, a focal point for debate about what the nation truly stands for, and that, in itself, is part of its power. It forces us to ask the hard questions. Are we living up to the ideals enshrined in these words? Are we truly the land of the free? Are we brave enough to confront our shortcomings and strive for a more perfect union? The story of the anthem is, therefore, a story that is still being written. It didn't end when the ink dried on the original manuscript, nor when it was officially adopted. It continues to be written every time a child learns the words in school, every time an immigrant sings it with a hand over their heart, and every time it inspires a debate about the nation's identity and future. It's a song of resilience because it has adapted and survived just like the nation it represents. It has been a constant through wars, depressions, and profound social upheavals. It's a thread that connects the past to the present and points us toward the future. It's a reminder that the nation is not a finished product, but an ongoing project, built on the foundation of hope and the unwavering belief in the possibility of a better dawn. So, the next time you hear this anthem, I encourage you to listen beyond the familiar melody. Hear the echo of cannon fire, but also hear the quiet determination of a people refusing to give up. Feel the pride, but also feel the weight of the responsibility it carries. Because this song is not just about a flag or a battle. It's about an idea that even in the face of overwhelming odds, the human spirit can endure. It's about the belief that freedom is a light worth defending, no matter how dark the night. And that is a message that will resonate for as long as there are people who dare to hope, to dream, and to build a better world. It is, and always will be, a nation's song of resilience. Thank you so much for joining me on this incredible journey. If you found this story as fascinating as I did, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel for more deep dives into the stories that have shaped our world. We'll see you next time.